Hello, and Merry Christmas, everyone. Today's video is a compilation of all the no sleep stories I've read on this channel over the last 6 or so months. As some of you may know already, I started a second channel for no sleep stories called Bad Vibes Nosleep. And that channel will be dedicated for no sleep stories and creepypastas. So if you like this video, make sure you subscribe to that channel for more no sleep stories. The link will be in the description. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. In the mid-90s, I used to be a photo technician. Those were the days when all you could do on a phone was dial a number, and if you wanted to take photos, you brought your camera containing actual rolls of film that you had to drop off at the store to be developed. Amazing how times change. As far as jobs go, I couldn't complain. The pay and hours were solid, and I was pretty much my own boss. But there was one thing I never really got used to. Looking at photos of complete strangers always felt slightly intrusive, even if they knew I was doing it. Spending hour after hour in an ominously lit, dark room filled with chemicals so you could take a peek at the memories of people you had never met is inherently voyeuristic. It's almost like going through someone's stuff, so that's why I always made sure not to get too interested in what photos I was developing. Some days I like to pretend that I was in a government lab developing film for some type of top secret project. But the reality was nowhere near that. Usually the most exciting pictures I dealt with were holiday pictures of parents wearing ugly Christmas sweaters, before they were a joke. One day, I was delivering some photos from a drop-off order. I had done the initial process and was now checking on my work to make sure it had come out okay. Everything looked fine, the colors were normal, and the images were just as they should be. Since this was back when someone could have red eye in the pictures, they weren't exactly the model of clarity and detail we have now, but they were acceptable. I was just about to put these away and start on my next order when for some reason, one of the photos caught my attention. Most of these pictures were shots of the outdoors that someone took near a park or something. There were some beautiful shots of a lake filled in on every side with dense pine trees. It was gorgeous to look at, but there's something a little off. One of the pictures showed a family of 5 gathered together in front of a cluster of blue sparse trees near a pond in the afternoon. In the left corner near the edge of the shot, there was a shape of a person. There wasn't much you could tell, but there was definitely a person standing there, wearing what looked like a black shirt and blue jeans. It's clear from the picture that the photographer was either ignoring the person or most likely had no idea that the person was even there. There was nothing obviously alarming about it, but it reminded me of one of those blurry Bigfoot pictures that were on the front page of some of those tabloids. It was something about that lone person lurking out in the woods that looked slightly creepy, but a random person making it into a shot happened a ton in pictures, especially back then. So I finished the order, went on with the next batch, and forgot about the picture. 3 weeks later, I was going through a totally different order when I found another strange picture. Except this one was different. Instead of the great outdoors, this picture was from a birthday party of some sort. In the picture I was looking at, everyone was inside of a massive dining room and clustered around a big dining room table, while the birthday girl, a blonde girl who looked like she was about 20, was blowing out the candles of her extravagant white birthday cake. But what caught my attention was the large bay window that everyone was facing away from. There was a man standing outside closely watching everyone inside. He was average looking from what I could tell, but what caught my attention was his expression. He wasn't standing out there with a woeful expression that said he was left out. No, this guy was intentionally watching them, like one who watches an animal at a zoo. I wasn't 100% sure, but I thought that he may be looking at whoever was taking the photo. Either way, I had no idea what to think. Was this a relative that was trying to pull a prank on the birthday girl or something? I've seen plenty of awkward and downright weird family photos, but this one seemed different. I've seen enough awkward family photos to know that you can recognize them almost immediately. They have a unique charm that gives you a good laugh, but in a heartwarming, oh my family is just like that way. Since there wasn't anything I could do about this weird picture, I checked the rest of the pictures, packaged them up, and kept on with my work. But this time, I couldn't shake the image. Over a month later, there was another weird picture. The setting this time was some kind of pool party. From the looks of the flag-themed decor, it was some kind of 4th of July get-together. It looked like a fun time, plenty of people waving sparklers and eating grilled hamburgers and hot dogs, in between taking a dip in the in-ground swimming pool. As the day turned into nighttime, the pictures now showed people gathering around a large campfire where they roasted marshmallows. My stomach dropped when I saw someone in the picture who looked like the guy from the birthday party picture. What gave him away was the same expression I had seen before. Unflinching, unsmiling, and out of place amidst all the holiday festivities. This time, he was in the next to last photo. The picture was from a huge gathering at some park. All the people were spread out on blankets and folding chairs. I figured everyone was there to see some fireworks. I didn't recognize the location or the other people in the shot, but there was no mistaking the man I saw peering at the group from far in the background. Was this a stalker or something? Because there's no way this could be a coincidence, especially because all the orders were placed under different names. The weird part was that the people in these pictures were completely different from the other ones I had seen before. The only similarity I could tell aside from the strange man was in both instances, he only appeared when there was a photo of a large group of people. The old saying, "A picture says 1,000 words," is very true at times, but sometimes you wish it would say 1,000 more. I had no idea what the context was for the stranger in the pictures. Worse, there was nothing I could really do. All I had was the name that the respective orders were placed under, and that was it. Ignoring the chill that had washed over me, I finished the order and went on to the next. I managed to forget about what I had seen until one night, about 2 months later. I was manning the customer service counter for the night and was just getting ready to go on break when I heard a telltale bell chiming. That meant that we had a customer. Putting my stuff down, I strode out of the front to take care of things. "How can I help you?" I asked the customer whose back was turned to me. "Hi, I have an order to pick up. I believe my wife placed it under the name Crawford." He turned to face me and my stomach dropped somewhere around my knees. It was a strange man from the pictures. Same closely chopped hair and unreadable expression. "Of course," I managed to say while checking the cartons of packages ready for pickup. Crawford was mercifully near the top. I wasted no time grabbing it and returning to face the guy. "Here you are. It will be $7.95. He gave me a 10 and I quickly made change. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" I asked over the deafening sound of my own heart rate. "Oh no, thank you. This is plenty. Between the two of us, I'm just happy to finally get some time off work. I'm in law enforcement, and my schedule is a mess," he added while showing me the legit badge and ID from inside his wallet. "No kidding." "Yep, I've been doing undercover work for the last few months, and it's finally over. That's why I'm thrilled to be doing something as ordinary as running errands. You should be able to read it all in the paper tomorrow. But there was a serial killer operating around here. His victims were all people he knew personally. He would go to their houses for holidays and stuff, and they never suspected a thing. I'll give you this, he was clever. Since he never wanted to have a picture taken there, he would instead volunteer to be the one to take the big family pictures for everyone. I even watched him do it a few times myself. Scary stuff, huh?" "Very," I agreed as relief began flooding through my body. It's easy to forget that a photo shows everything except the person taking it. I love Halloween. I look forward to it each year with great enthusiasm and excitement. The weather turns crisp and the leaves start to change, and the holiday buzz begins to vibrate once more. It's a catalyst, a kickstarter for the final stretch of another year. Nature slowly exhales color in a gorgeous flourish of red, orange, and yellow as the days begin to shorten. Summer clothes are put away, and the apple cider makes its comeback. Unfortunately, I'm the only one in my friend group that enjoys the darker side of Halloween. I'm talking about the scary aspect, horror movies, haunted houses, and ghost tours. My friends like the concept and the theme that hangs over this time of the year, but when it comes to actually participating in these events, well, they are usually nowhere to be found. Each year I tolerate their cowardice and typically end up joining the group in whatever activity they decide upon. But this year I wanted more. This year I finally decided to go out on my own and really embrace the scary side of Halloween. I pleaded, begged a couple of my friends to join me in this endeavor, but they backed out apologetically, claiming they weren't interested, and so I set out alone. I scoured the internet and local papers, searching for something that would please my horror hunger pains. I didn't want some dumbed down, haunted house filled with giggling and screaming children. I also didn't want to do anything that was too crowded. After much fruitless searching, I saw an advertisement for something called Corn Maze 43. There is very little information about it, and when I checked out the address, I saw that it was in a very rural part of the state. It promised scares unlike you'd ever seen before. With such confidence boasting, I decided to give it a try. I checked the calendar and decided I was going to go on Halloween night. If it bored me, I could always join my friends somewhere and engage in whatever lame activity they were doing. I didn't particularly care that I was going alone, but some company to share the experience with would have been nice. In any case, once Halloween night rolled around, I was tingling with excitement. That night, around 8, I hopped in my car and headed for the attraction. The countryside blurred past my windows, illuminated by the full moon. I rolled down my window and let the cold air in. After about an hour, I checked my GPS again and saw that I was getting close. The road continued to twist and wind through uninhabited country, a rolling, silent expanse of grass, rolling hills, and peaceful serenity. As I got closer, now only half a mile away, I wondered if I was going the right way. I didn't see any signs of life, nor signs for the corn maze. Just as I was about to give up, utterly disappointed, I saw a single wooden post hammered into the earth along the roadside. Written vertically along it in black paint were the words, Corn Maze 43, with an arrow pointing down the dirt road that I had almost missed. Rejuvenated, I turned the wheel and began to bump down the narrow road. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. As I left a trail of dust in my wake, I scanned my surroundings and realized I was entering a massive cornfield. The stalks rose high around me, and the road continued to snake erratically through the rows of the still farmland. I rounded a bend and hit my brakes, heart leaping into my throat. My headlights illuminated the end of the road directly in front of me. A wall of corn boxed my car in from all sides, and I saw I was not the only visitor tonight. Another car parked in front of me, unmoving and dark. Where was everyone, though? I at least expected some sort of attraction center or booth, but there was none in sight. I turned my car off and got out, slightly confused. My boots crunched over the gravel as I wandered over to the car parked in front of mine. I glanced inside and saw it was empty. I scratched my head and gnawed at my lip. I scanned the walls of corn around me and something caught my attention. It was a divide, a narrow rectangular of darkness that led into the field. Impaled in the earth next to the entrance was another wooden post that read Maze 43. If another car hadn't been there, I would have gone home. This seemed like an old attraction, some relic of previous years, but since I knew I wasn't alone, I decided to go check it out. If I entered the maze and I realized my assumptions were correct, I would just leave. I went back to my car to retrieve a flashlight. Clicking it on, I swung the beam back to the entrance and almost suffered a heart attack. Standing directly in front of the maze was a person clothed in a red cloak. A hood was pulled low over their face, and jutting from the oval of darkness was a long, black beak. I placed my hand over my chest and slowed my racing heart. It was a man wearing a mask. The attraction manager. It had to be. Hello? I raised my hand to him. The man didn't move. I saw your ad, I continued, staring at the odd bird-masked man. Is this the right place for the haunted corn maze? After a moment, the masked man stepped to the side and pointed a red-gloved hand at the entrance. His robe fluttered in the wind, and he remained silent. I saw dark plastic eyes glittering out at me from the shadow of his hood, a crow's mask. Do I need to pay anything? I asked. The man pointed down the long, open throat of corn. Okay, I'm going in, I said, making my way towards it. I kept the light beam off of him, but as I passed the man, I couldn't help but look at his face. The long beak and beady plastic eyes stared back. With the man behind me, I entered the maze. The walls of corn rose over my head and shifted in the wind. It sounded like dozens of people were sprinting past me, mere feet away, unseen. I felt the first of the excited fear, but knew it only stemmed from the total isolation I was encased in. I continued my trek, twisting and winding through the maze, passing intersections and bends, turning abrupt corners, and choosing new pathways. As I walked, I kept expecting someone to jump out and scare me, but nothing did. In fact, I hadn't stumbled across anything remotely frightening. After about 35 minutes, I was ready to leave. Frustrated, I turned around, determined to piece together from memory the path back to my car. As I turned, I noticed something off the beaten path inside the cornfield. I squinted and shined my light on it. It was a double-door vault, like a weathered bulkhead. Painted across the rusty doors were the words, Corn Maze 44. Intrigued, I left the path and pushed through the corn towards it. What was this all about? Was this part of the attraction? It had to be, but why was it so hidden? It didn't make much sense, but I was so desperate to discover something exciting, so I decided to inspect it. I tried the handle and found it opened easily. I shined a light down into the gasping mouth of darkness before me. Concrete stairs descended to an equally unimpressive hallway composed of the same plain faced concrete. I thought for a second, then shrugged. Screw it, let's see what this is all about. If nothing else, I might have a good story to tell my friends. I crept down the stairs, shining my flashlight ahead of me. The air smelled moldy and stale, like no one had been down here in years. I reached the bottom of the stairs and my light was swallowed up by the long expanse of the hallway. I started to walk, my boots echoed off the walls, and everything suddenly was very quiet. I kept walking. There was no branching passageways or alternate routes, just one continuous tongue of barren concrete stretching out before me. After about 10 minutes walking, I started to think that it was a waste of time. Seconds before turning back, a repeating instinct tonight. My light caught another door. It was at the top of another small flight of stairs, leading back to the surface. Curiously, I ascended. I placed my hand on the cold iron and pushed. With a great creaking groan, the door opened. I blinked as light flooded inside, a dim, gloomy wash of dull color. I clicked my light off and stepped out to the other side. I looked onto the world, and my breath was robbed from my lungs. I felt a deep charge erupt in my stomach, and my senses were overwhelmed with the impossible. Endless cornfields stretched as far as the eye could see, disappearing in the overcast horizon. Jolting from the earth, littering the cornfields, were enormous structures of pure black. They rose up like faceless skyscrapers, windowless and perfect in their slick design. They were rectangular and appeared to be made from some unknown rock. They towered over the fields, their summits nothing more than a blank, flat surface. Perched atop the dozen looming formations were hundreds of motionless birds, but they were huge, easily 6 or 7 feet in length. Their long beaks and folded wings were the color of midnight. Their bodies were sickly thin. I traced the birds across the sky, catching a few in mid-flight. They were flocking towards the great structures from the cornfields. I felt my stomach turn as my eyes settled on the expanse of swaying stalks. Littering the earth were endless wood crosses, erect without order. Nailed to the crosses were men and women, bloodied and in agony. With terrifying realization, I saw that each person had a pumpkin shoved over their head, completely encasing it. They looked like crucified scarecrows, alive and squirming in torment. But it didn't end there. Impregnated in each one of the pumpkin was some kind of hose. I could see orange fluid pulsing through it, a continuous flow. I traced the hoses up to their origin and felt my blood turn to ice. Hanging in the sky was an absolutely titanic human body. It was upside down and naked, its male sexuality shockingly visible. It was wrapped in thick chains, the iron crisscrossing over the enormous being's chest. Binding its ankles was a second coil of chain. I craned my head back, mouth agape, and traced the endless link to the cloud-filled sky, where it disappeared. Whatever this nightmare hung from, I couldn't see it, the overcast heavens obscuring the source. The hanging giant was unmoving, its colossus body a living statue of human flesh. I ran my eyes along the lengths of its upside-down body and felt my knees tremble as I gazed upon its head. A fat orange thing wedged itself on top of the man's shoulders. Protruding from the rigid exterior were countless hoses, snaking, swaying, descending from the thing in the sky. Each hose ended at the crucified humans, the tubing rammed into the pumpkin-headed people, pumping them full of that foul orange fluid. I saw all of this in an instant. A freight train of horrified amazement that slammed into my eyes with the full force of a locomotive. I stepped back, swinging my gaze from the upside-down giant in the sky to the crucified humans in the fields, and then over towards the towering black constructs that held the mass of birds. All sense of reason and logic was eradicated in an instant. A sledgehammer obliterating the fragile glass orb that had once been my mind. I fell to my knees, unable to hold myself up. Everything I had ever understood rushed out of me in a bluster of disbelief and crippling impossibility. And that's when I felt something grab the back of my neck. I tried to scream, but the pain was too great for such a natural escape. I was lifted off my feet and turned around to face my captor. I recoiled as I gazed on the thing that held me. It was an ogre-like creature, a pale, gnarled thing with meaty hands that gripped me like a vice. It was easily 3 times as tall as me, and its drooling, crooked mouth leered down at me. Rising from its back was a net filled with a mountain of pumpkins, of all shapes and sizes. Their weight was so great that it forced the creature to bend over, pressing down towards the earth. Again, I tried to scream, its bulbous, slightly pink eyes staring down at me. I raised my hands and tried to pry his fingers from my throat, but it was useless. The ogre gurgled something and then began to walk, taking me with it. We were going into the cornfields. I was held clumsily at its side, my body smacking indifferently against its legs. I struggled to squeeze air down my throat. Each breath was a battle. I blinked back tears of pain and turned to see where the monster was taking me. As I did, I saw a flock of new birds rise from the fields. They cawed loudly, their great wings taking them high up into the sky. I saw them climb up to the heavens and soar towards the great faceless constructs of the black rock that jutted from the land like rotten teeth. When the murder of crows landed on top of one such surface, I noticed something I hadn't before. The protruding mass of rock sank ever so slightly back into the earth, and as it did, a great clanking rattle shook the sky. My eyes tore over to the hanging giant. It had descended by a fraction, bringing it closer towards the earth. And that's when pieces began to click in my mind. Fractured formations slowly taking shape in a form of grim understanding. Whatever this horrible place was, wherever it sat in the multitude of unknown nightmares, these birds were trying to free this titan in the sky. The jutting black rocks were some sort of counterweight to what the giant's chains were bound to. With each new flock of massive birds, the structure sank, bringing the chained monster in the sky closer to earth. But the birds, where did they come from? As this question shuddered through my mind, my captor reached the fields of endless crucifix. The wooden crosses rose around us as I stared at them with my bloodshot eyes. Now that I was closer, a new realization ripped through me like a bolt of lightning. The humans upon the crosses were changing. Pumpkins encasing their faces continued to fill with orange fluid that pumped down from the giant in the sky, and as they did so, I could see physical mutation beginning to blossom. With disgusted horror, I saw beaks protruding from the pumpkins, each at varying stages of growth, that jutted through the orange flesh, covered with neon ooze. As we continued to pass the crucified, I saw something I would never forget. A cluster of 3 crosses stood in a semicircle, and as we approached, the skin of the hanged people exploded with shocking violence. Emerging from the ruined remains were massive crows, unfurling and expanding to their full height. They screeched loudly and flapped their wings for the first time, taking flight and rising towards the great rock structures. Before I had time to process this new display of unsettling horror, the ogre was spinning me around, the world a blur of dull gray and green. The grip around my throat was temporarily removed, and I gasped, but only had time for a single breath before I was clutched around the waist. I was being raised. The creature pinned me against something, stretching me out above its head. My back slammed onto something, and I felt splinters of wood claw into my shirt. No. Oh, please no. The dawning horror of what was about to happen, I released a shriek of throat-tearing fear and pleading desperation. This monster was going to crucify me. I struggled frantically as the ogre held me up against the cross, splaying my arms with its massive, prodding fingers. Tears poured from my eyes as I watched it reach down and retrieve an enormous nail from a pouch on its waist. With the precision of a surgeon, the ogre drove it through my arm at the wrist. It happened in the blink of an eye, the beast mauling me with horrifying quickness. The pain was immediate and terrible, a rod of fire pinning me to the wooden crossbeam. Blood erupted from the punctured flesh and dripped lazily down my arm, soaking my clothes. Before I had time to recover, the ogre slammed another nail into my other arm. A cry shattered my vocal cord, and the world shook as my vision blurred, tears running down my face. Gasping, sobbing, I watched helplessly as this monster reached behind itself and retrieved a pumpkin from the colossal heap on its back. Through gritted teeth, I begged uselessly, watching as it raised its arms and prepared to bring it down over my head. But something stopped it. A sound soaring across the sky. Someone was screaming. A woman. I blinked away a tear and stared past the ogre. From his height, I gained a new perspective of the cornfield. Littering the land was a dozen of bulkheads, some closed, most open. Wandering out of them were dazed, confused people, sharing the same horrified wonder I had felt. The woman who was screaming stood a couple hundred yards away, watching as my captor nailed me to the cross. The ogres, one of many I now saw, all with mountains of pumpkins on their backs, turned to the woman. She took a step back, shrieking. Deciding that it could finish me later, it lumbered towards her, grinning through its mouthful of fragmented teeth. I turned away. Pain ran through me like currents of electricity. My pierced flesh boiled with constant pain. I looked at the nail driven through my skin and felt as if they would tear away, taking chunks with it. I needed to escape before the ogres came back to finish the job. It was hard to concentrate, hard to think through the wall of pain that slammed into my senses with every beat of my heart. I rolled my head back against the wood, trying to steady my shuddering chest. I stared out at the field of crosses, my eyes bloodshot and moist, and then I squinted, the pain vanishing for a moment as I spotted something. It was a massive singular plate of iron, 100 yards in diameter. It rested on the surface of the earth, some sort of enormous vault or gate, and hinges the size of houses. It looked like a manhole, but the biggest one I've ever seen. Etched in black across the surface were 2 words, Christmas Land. It was nonsense to me, but something told me that whatever was happening here had something to do with that great covered hole. Get out, stop wasting time, and get out of this place, I thought, the pain returning in waves of furious violence. I looked at my impaled flesh one more time and prepared myself for the inevitable pain. I shut my eyes and gritted my teeth so hard that I could hear my jaw pop, and then I began to pull myself off the cross. A gory, bloody act of desperation and survival. I screamed until I tasted blood. I arched my back and pushed away from the cross with my feet, pulling my arms out and over the nails. With sickening fear, I felt myself pull free and plunge to the earth. I smacked onto the dirt and stars exploded in my head. I gasped, scrambling to my feet, fighting off a threatening blackout. I looked at my mangled wrist and winced and gagged. I tore my shirt into strips and bound my wounds as tightly as I could, stemming the flow of blood. And then I ran. I ran as hard and as fast as I had ever. Cornstalks whipping at my face as I plunged through them, tongues of heat licking my cheeks. I didn't slow. I didn't falter. I didn't wince. Hell was on my heels, and I know I didn't have long before it caught up. I snaked through the corn, heading back towards the bulkhead I emerged from, breath hissing from my lungs like gusts of hot steam. My head thundered, and I felt an inferno pulse through me with every heartbeat. I tripped, caught myself, and plunged forward. I could hear the great screech of the crows coming from the cornfields, a deafening cry louder than I've ever heard before. I chanced a glance over my shoulder and saw the sky go dark as a flock rose from the crosses. There had to be thousands of them, a mass of ungodly creations birthed from the bodies of the taken. They ascended as one and disappeared, settling on top of the gray stone towers. Still running, I saw them sink into the earth, and then the rattle of chains followed, an echo of massive iron. The titan in the sky plunged to the earth, the counterweight releasing the final distance. The earth shook as I collapsed into the field, a rolling explosion of incredible power. The chains flew from its body like an eruption of shrapnel as I heard shards whistle overhead like cannonballs. As the monstrous giant made contact with the ground, the mammoth pumpkin around its head shattered, casting a hurricane of wet orange across the land. I stood up, knees trembling. The colossus being stood as well, a towering creature of massive proportions. Rising from its shoulders, previously hidden by the pumpkin, was the head of a crow. Its beak was like a scythe, a massive, dangerous thing that protruded from its black feathered face and 2 globe-like eyes. In elation, it raised its head to the heavens and screamed, a piercing, skull-splitting cry. The birds on the great stone structures echoed their god's call and took flight. Swarming down from the heights, they swirled around the thundering giant like a storm cloud, cawing and calling to their master. I tore my eyes from the terrifying spectacle and pressed on, new fear giving me the strength I needed to reach my destination. I felt the crow-headed giant lumbering behind me, its legs like pillars of quaking concrete that rattled the earth. Finally, desperately, mercifully, I found the bulkhead that I had first emerged from. The door stood open, inviting me back down into the long, dark hallway. Crying tears of relief, I took one last look over my shoulder. The Titan, along with its swarming congregation, was ripping open the immense hatch, the one that read Christmas Land. With a roar of fury, it flung the iron cover away, tearing it from its hinges and flinging it like it was weightless. The crow god stared down into the gaping hole and let out a cry of rage and anger, so fierce I felt my bladder release. The great Titan got down on its knees and slithered inside, roaring so loud I felt pain split my skull. The flock of birds rallied around their master and dove down into the hole, screaming and cawing as if lost in madness, as if they were going to war. I turned away, heart thundering, and sprinted down to the darkness of the bulkhead. My breath ripped past my lips as I bolted down the dark hallway, begging my body to stay conscious and in motion. Faintly, I spotted moonlight on the other end, dripping down from the dark sky to splash across the concrete steps. I reached them and tore up them, exploding out into the familiar night. I didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't hesitate. My boots churned the earth as I fled back through the corn, back to my car, away from my nightmare called Corn Maze 44. I didn't have time to reflect on my horrifying experience until after I received medical attention from the hospital. I laid on a gurney, my arms stitched and bandaged. I lost a lot of blood, but somehow I managed to stay conscious until I came speeding into the nearest emergency room. My terrors I had seen clung to my mind like burning claws. They gripped my memory like an unflinching horror. What had that place been? Where had it been? What world had I stumbled on? Where had the crow god gone? And what was Christmas Land? I didn't have answers to these questions, and I knew I never would. If I spoke to others about my experience, I wouldn't be long for a madhouse. I wouldn't blame them. What I saw was impossible and held no place in reality. The only reason I, myself, haven't descended into total insanity is because of the last thing I saw before reaching my car. The only thing that assured me that I hadn't been hallucinating some horrific world. Something that made it real. It was the man in the plastic mask, clothed in red. Because, you see, he was no longer a man. He was one of those crows. And as I plunged through the last of the corn maze and stumbled to my car, I saw him, shred its robes away and spread its wings. But it didn't take flight into the starry sky. Instead, it burrowed into the earth, down to find its master in the tunnels of reality that ran unseen beneath the world. When I opened my eyes, I realized I couldn't move. Oh no, not this again, I thought to myself as my eyes shifted back and forth. Shadows danced around my room that I shared with my brother. I wondered what my brain has in store for me this morning, as these things get worse every time I have them. I watched as an old man slunk in my room. He had no eyes, a bloody hook for a hand, and a disturbing grin on his face. He walked towards me slowly, exaggerating each step as his eyes got larger and darker as he stared more intently at me. Suddenly he was right next to my bed, looking down on me. He got on one knee and put a stick in my face. I watched as the blood dripped off the tip and fell onto my face. Then he put the tip on my neck. Something slapped my face. My brother. Bro, why'd you do that? I asked, annoyed. You had that look on your face. You were scaring me. I'm alright. No, you're not. I told you it's just sleep paralysis. Everyone gets it eventually. I haven't, he said, all-knowingly. You're related to me, so you might, patting his shoulders. Come on, let's get ready for school. I don't want to go to school, he whined. You have to. It's good for you. We have this conversation every morning. It's essential you go to school. Okay. I got up to get dressed in my usual black attire. I put my coat on, and I went to the kitchen where my brother was eating already. I take out a piece of pizza and eat it cold. When I'm done, I usher my brother out the door. On the walk there, we talked about school. As we neared his school, I watched him run ahead to a small group of friends. As soon as he got there, I ran to my school and ran to the library trying to finish my report before school begins. I type on the computer until the bell rings. I get up to walk to class, but I'm blocked by a jock. "Hey, fuckface." "Hello, parasite," I retorted. "Oh, haha, good one, fuckface." He fake laughs and then pushes me back. I use this to make my escape as I run around him. As he comes at me, he practically races me to my classroom, and I make it in just in time. The jock isn't behind me. I complete my classes and go to the other side of school to pick up my brother. "Hey, how was your day?" "It sucked," he complained. "Oh, why's that?" "Some guy came up to me and told all my friends that you got beat up. Then they started picking on me because they said since you were weak, I was weaker." I looked him in the eye and said, "Do I look beat up?" "No," he said, "but I know you could beat up that jerk." "I could, but I won't, unless he were to pick on you. Don't worry about me, and as for your friends." I walked over to them and asked them the same question I asked my brother. They said no. I replied exactly and walked away. My brother and I walked home in silence. I greeted my mother and cooked dinner. My brother waited patiently. My mother watched TV. It was silent until she said, "Your father is coming home late tonight." "Typical," my brother said. My mother turned to him slowly and said in a low voice, "You know, without your father, we wouldn't have a food or house, so don't get that attitude, young man, or you will really feel what it's like to have no father." I put dinner in front of my brother and say quietly, "Just let it go." We eat in silence and go to our room. "I want to run away," my brother says as he kicks his pile of dirty laundry. "You will do no such thing. We just have to live with the resources we have. But it will be better without them. We could stow away on the strips and travel the world and have adventures. Maybe you should write a book. It would be epic, but I don't want you to make it a reality." "Okay," he grumbled. I pull out my notebook and start doing my homework. Once I finish, I throw myself into bed and close my eyes. I woke up to crying, screaming, and thrashing. I get up and look on the top bunk and make sure my brother was alright. He wasn't there. I panic and run out to the hallway to see my brother being dragged on the ground by my stepfather. I run up to him and punch him in the face. My stepfather fell back, letting go of my brother. I pick up my brother and thrust him back to the door. Got up and started running, but my stepfather grabbed my foot and started pulling me down. I kicked into him and got out and fought as I yelled at my brother to lock himself in the bedroom and did not open it until I yelled the code word. I kicked my father multiple times until he toppled over. I ran and yelled the code word, "Heartache." He opened the door and I busted in and closed it and locked it. My father came to the door. "You better open this door or you're going to get what your brother has coming to him." "Please don't let him take me, Titus," my brother whimpered. "Over my dead body." I yelled back without hesitation, but before I could finish, I stared as the crowbar slid through the crack of the door. Without hesitation, I hoisted my brother out through the window and told him to run. I grabbed my emergency backpack and was getting ready to follow him out, but was suddenly grabbed from behind. My father pulled me to the floor. "Why did you let that little shit get away?" "To protect him from his own father," I yelled. He kicked me in the mouth. "Shut up, boy. You're not my own, so maybe this won't hurt me as bad," he said, dragging me. I made an effort to leave the backpack in the room as I was dragged down the hallway to the living room. "Here, take this one," I heard him say. "This is not the one you promised me, Henry." I know, but the little shit got away. "So take this one, trust me, I will find the useless little boy. I will give you 1/4 the price I originally offered for this one. Half." "You're not in the right position to argue with me, Henry," the man said, raising the gun to my stepfather's head, causing him to raise his hands in defeat. As the guy continued to speak, "You should be lucky I'm even paying you at all for this one," he said, looking at me and smiling menacingly. "Take him, boys," he commanded, and like that I was swept away. As I was being pulled out the door, I noticed the muffled sound of my mother banging on the closet, screaming and begging for them not to take me, but she went ignored. I was thrown in the trunk of a limo. Thoughts raced through my head like cars on the highway. Half of them were of being exhausted, and the other half were ways to escape my demise. I was surprised when no more than 3 minutes later, the trunk opened. Honestly, boys, this is no way to treat our new guest. I heard a man say as he stuck out his hand. "Come on, boy, let's take a look at you." Without thinking, I took his hand and allowed myself to be helped out of the trunk. "What's your name, boy?" "Titus." "Ah, yes. I did hear that poor woman mention your name a few times." "What did you do to her?" I asked defensively. "Oh, dear Titus, that woman's fate is out of my hands," he said with a voice that lacked sympathy. I felt like throwing up. I wished in the back of my mind she was unharmed. "Now, Titus, let's discuss your fate. You're too old to be on my website, but you do have a boyish, handsome face. I'll give you that." "You run a child pornography site?" I asked, disgusted. The man chuckled. "No. Nice guess, though." No, my dear Titus. I traffic these children, make a profit. And the reason why I traffic the younger ones is because it's easier for people to teach them. But why should you have to worry about that? That is not your fate. Like I said, you're too old to teach, so what I want to do is put you on a less popular but still successful site. You will be treated like royalty before you're bought, because, after all, you can't let good meat go to waste. "You're gonna sell me to a cannibal?" "Precisely, kid. Or more like parts of you." His answer is so straightforward. "You better enjoy the last days." I threw up. The thoughts of me being eaten by another human being contorted and took life in my mind. It made me sick to my stomach. It made me gag. It made me actually throw up my dinner. The action took the man by surprise. I used this opportunity to slam my fist into his cheek. The man who threw me in the trunk pounced on me, but I was quicker and got them off. I had taken lessons of self-defense, Tai Chi, and I knew how to win. The two fell on the ground as they collided into each other. I grabbed the man by his neck and started choking him. Something hit the side of my head, knocking me over, allowing the man to scramble away. I looked up quickly as I saw one of the two bodyguards' foot. He stomped my head into the concrete multiple times until my vision blurred and I eventually blacked out. "Is he dead?" "No." "Good. I want him to suffer now." "Likewise," said the bodyguard as he tossed me into the trunk. "You really came through for me. You shall be rewarded greatly." "Thank you, sir. So what do you want?" That boy. Confused look spread over the boss's face. "I didn't know you were a cannibal. You might not know a lot about me, boss." "True." The boss thought for a minute. "I'll give you a major discount for him. $70. The bodyguard's eyes lit up like a child on Christmas. "Deal." When I woke up, I stared into the wooden ceiling and tried to move, but I was tied down with what felt like leather straps. "That was quite a display you put on, Titus." For a second there, I didn't understand what he was talking about. Then I realized he must have been talking about when I almost killed the guy. Almost. It was good that I saved my boss, because now I can have you. "The bodyguard?" "You seem surprised." "What do you want with me?" I asked angrily, growing tired of being tossed around by people. "Pleasure." New thoughts came to my head. Am I going to be raped? No, this can't be happening. "Don't worry, it's probably not what you're thinking. It's a lot worse," he said as he picked up a hacksaw. What freak show was I dragged into? I could feel cold sweats running down my face. I was starting to panic. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My voice was gone. My tears were rushing. My sweat was getting to my eyes, blurring my vision. The bodyguard laughed gleefully as he put the hacksaw down onto my face, slicing my eye in half. My voice found me, and I was screeching at the top of my lungs. I was blind in one eye. Blood formed a puddle on my eye socket. This was the end for me. I was going to die in this room with this deranged man who was now talking to himself. I looked at him with my last eye and saw it. No, he wasn't talking to himself. He was talking to a camera. He was filming this whole thing. As soon as I noticed, the man turned around, throwing something and hitting me square in the other eye. It was a needle of a dart. I was now completely blind. All I could hear was the sound of me screaming and nothing else. Blood filled my mouth like a tidal wave. I started choking, suffocating, as blood poured down my throat. He had cut off my tongue. I could no longer mutter a sound other than my desperate wheezing sounds. I could hear the man more clearly now. Ah, isn't this better? Now I can hear myself. And speaking of hearing, should I allow my subject to hear his ultimate demise, or should I take it as he doesn't want to know what's coming next? There was a pause and a giggly laughter. 47 of you voted for the boy to have his hearing taken. 179 of you want him to keep it, and some of you can't make up your mind. I'm talking to you, Shelby Lee Carroll, at 783 Cornell Street, South Carolina, Ashton Cooper, 456 Wall Street, New York, and Henry Faulkner, boy's father, 722 Copper Lane, LA. The recognition of my address must have changed something in what I imagine, my miserable looking face, because the bodyguard let out a howl of laughter. It was at this point I had not realized that he was not only filming this, but it was a live stream. Yes, that's right, my lovely viewers. This boy is special. His own father sold him for $1,500 to my boss. This boy is very skillful and nearly escaped, but I stopped him by stomping his head into the cement a few times, which is something I quite enjoyed. And say, Henry, did you find that little shit? A pause. Still looking, I see. And when he finds him, he's selling him to my boss for child trafficking. Well, at least if I don't find him first, he said, letting out another howl of laughter. I was dying inside. It's bad enough that this was happening to me, but if it happened to my little brother, I would never forgive myself in whatever afterlife comes after this hell. By now, I couldn't tell the difference between tears and blood and the sweat, but I knew I was crying. I know I couldn't speak, but right now I was screaming every curse word in the book. A blade touched my neck, slicing my shirt and my skin in half. You're ripped, Titus. I wasn't sure whether he meant my shirt or my body, or if this was a crappy pun describing both. The next thing I heard was a searing sound, as I felt a hot iron touch my body. I couldn't scream. All I could do was feel the iron, and there wasn't anything I could do to express my unbearable pain, but gasp and gag. That bastard rubbed that thing down my body, searing my skin. I wanted to die. You're hot, he said jokingly. I prayed for death. The man was laughing more and more as he did these things to me. He cut me multiple times, then dosed my cuts with hot chili pepper sauce. He cut off my fingers one by one, making comments and puns, and then asking the audience what he should do next in between tortures. All I could do is gasp, pray, and listen until I heard the bastard striking up a conversation with my stepfather again. I'm getting bored with this subject, but before I finish him off, Henry, I want you to decide how to finish off the boy. He is your son after all. There's a pause. I'm sorry, can you say that out loud, Henry? My bastardly stepfather's voice rang out and echoed through the room. I said, burn that little deadbeat, no good bitch alive. I heard the familiar voice of my father. No. I heard the screaming of my mother in the background. Shut up, bitch. Your deadbeat son was no good in the first place. Ooh, drama, the monster sang as he cut them off. Well, you heard the man. He wants to burn this little no good deadbeat alive. Now, hold on a second while I get my gas can. I heard the floorboards creak as he walked away. I used this time to reflect on my situation. I tried to imagine what I looked like. I tried to imagine the sick crowd of people watching my demise. I prayed some more and more that my brother would get out safe. My life flashed before my eyes. In my thinking, I heard something. It must have been my imagination. It was a whimpering, a crying, a familiar sound. Titus, I'm sorry. Was that? No, it couldn't be. Before he comes back, I'm going to put you out of your misery. The last stab I received was to the heart, and the last thing I heard, good night, fuckface. The boy then turned from my corpse. That once was a schoolmate that he bullied, but he did not deserve all that. No, not like that. I never knew his dad was such a sick fuck. Heck, I never knew that my dad was even sicker until I decided to get something from the basement today. All I knew is that his and my father did not deserve to be alive. I turned to the camera and said, I know where you all live, and I will find you. I will kill all of you for letting this poor soul suffer. People like you disgust me, and after I finish off your host, Henry, you're next. People were logging off now. The show was over. Only a few stayed to watch the host die, I suppose. I hid in my hiding spot and heard the creaking of the floorboards. The monster, who was my father, walked in. Oh, why did so much people... But I did not allow him to finish the sentence. I pointed a gun at him and shot him in the head. I stomped his head until it was vanquished. Then I calmly took note of the names and addresses of the people who viewed this event. I poured gas around the two corpses and lit a fire. I walked away from the house in flames. Titus will not die in vain. I will find them all. I will kill them all, as I promised I will. Sadly, I never got to tell Titus how sorry I was, and not for only how he died, but for also how I treated him, and how I was shocked that my father was doing this. I couldn't save him. Seeing my father transfer into a monster sent me out of my mind. And now the only thing matters is how I'm going to first find his no-good stepfather. And even better, Titus' stepbrother, because not only did I want to kill the man, but I also wanted to save his stepbrother and his mother. Maybe if I did this, in whatever afterlife he is in, he'll forgive me and maybe even rest in peace. If I somehow manage to lose signal, please send help. I've tried outgoing calls hundreds of times. I'm not sure how long we've been gone. The data on my phone makes no sense. GPS isn't working and our maps don't seem to align. I'm not sure how long I've been driving or how much longer I can keep it up. Search and rescue should have been looking for us a long time ago. Our families would have sent help. There is no dirt road that can go this long without any signs of life. Something is wrong. Very, very wrong. Update. I've documented our trip in detail. If we don't find our way home, I hope someone reads our story. July 7th. My friend Travis and I left to go camping. We left in the wee hours of the morning when it was still dark. Travis slept and I drove along the pitch black highway as we descended into the mountains. Eventually, the radio turned to static and I turned it off. We had planned a trip in the Rocky Mountains National Park, but the road was shut down and we got all turned around and upside down, so we just kept driving. I remember seeing a sign for Sawtooth Mountain, but that was quite a ways back. Even if no one sees this, I need to sort this out in my head. We drove in the dark slowly along the dirt roads, looking for a good place to hike around and set up camp. We spotted a small trail inlet with a camping permitted sign, so we pulled over, parked our car and marked our spot on the GPS, and grabbed our camping supplies. We hiked a few hours or so until we reached a secluded area in the woods near a small lake. We spent the afternoon setting up camp and gathering firewood, also hiking around a bit to become familiar with our surroundings. The day passed quickly and the dusk descended on us. Travis and I watched the sunset, sitting around a fire, and passed a bottle of Buffalo Trace back and forth. The moon was completely full that night, shining across the lake. Only a few clouds in the sky, and there were so many stars that the sky looked fake. It was the kind of quiet you never get in the city, no matter what hour. We hadn't seen nor heard anyone come and go from our camp area all evening, or on the hiking trail for that matter. As the night went on, we heard a strange distant noise that night that immediately sent us into high alert. It sounded like someone was clearing their throat through static playing on an old radio, but in a chittering noise that an animal would make. We both looked at each other. What the fuck was that? It made us both woozy and changed the mood immediately. The noise in the distance quieted down. Maybe we've had a little too much bourbon, Travis told me with an uneasy look. We calmed down and pretty much forgot about the noise. We decided to get some rest. We eventually dozed off, but I'm not sure I truly ever fell asleep. I kept waking up to images of dark figures watching me in the woods. July 8th. I woke up to Travis yelling outside the tent. "John, get out here." I could tell something was wrong by the tone in his voice. I climbed out of the tent and saw Travis standing there, looking up into the trees. I followed his gaze and saw our packs hanging in the tree branches, about 40 feet in the air. What the fuck could have done this? We stared at each other uneasy and frightened. Something was not right, but the prospect of someone doing this while we were passed out didn't make much sense. And how would someone even do that? It would have made a lot of noise that I would have heard while laying there half asleep. Had I fallen in a deeper sleep than I thought? And what kind of animal could possibly do something like that? We spent all afternoon trying to get our things down from the trees, throwing rocks, attempting to climb. Neither of us were interested in another night in the forest. By the time we knocked our packs free from the branches, it was already dusk, and we still had a long hike, and we were too exhausted. We packed our things up and hiked our way back around the lake towards the main trail. We came across a little site that was protected perfectly, nestled up next to a rock wall, surrounded by a few large pine trees. We tried to brush off the strangeness from the morning. I had a pounding headache, and I thought perhaps dipping into the whiskey bottle would calm it down. We broke out our snacks, realizing that neither of us had eaten much. I still felt uneasy, but took small comfort in the fact that we had a gun and a camp axe. Night descended upon us once more, and we sat around the fire, but spent most of the time staring into the fire. Neither of us much in mood for conversation. Our moods had turned dark. I was stroking the fire with a camp stick that I had been whittling on, and before I could even look up, something in the distance behind Travis's shoulder sent a chill down my spine. I froze. I saw something moving in the tree lines along the lake. I squinted. The silhouette of a man, yet impossibly tall, looming, and the darkest black I've ever seen. It didn't move like a man. It appeared in one place, then the next, peeking out from behind the tree trunks, then ducking behind them. It got closer, maybe 50 yards away. Travis saw the expression change on my face, and he heard the rustling behind him in the woods and froze. He turned his head to look behind him, but it had vanished. Trying to describe the truly awful, pulsing shadow of a man I had seen peeking at us behind the large pine trees. I was shivering. I was watching it, expecting it to appear before us at any second. And the feeling in the pit of my stomach, the feeling of pure dread, overwhelmed my entire body. My blood ran cold. I wanted to vomit. Travis saw the color drain out of my face. "Hand me my pack. I'll get the pistol out," he whispered, trying not to show any fear. We called out into the forest, trying our best to frighten whatever was out there. "Who's out there? We're armed. Show yourself now or we will shoot," Travis called out. Dead silence, but I could feel its presence. Travis cocked the pistol and walked carefully towards where the man had stood. "If you're out here, show yourself now. I don't want to shoot you," he called while advancing out of our camping area and into the tree line. I followed shaken, but taking steps behind him carrying my camp axe. I was filled with a mixture of anger and terror, and I felt a strange sadness that overcame me. Travis froze. The trees rattled in the distance. He stammered. It just fucking shimmied up a tree and vanished." I had seen it too. We bolted back to our camp. "I've never seen anything move that way," Travis said softly. That thing. It's like staring into a void," I said. "We need to leave now." "Where the fuck did it go?" "It's up there, watching us." We quickly packed up as many things as we could, and then made our way to the trail. We didn't make it more than 5 minutes down the mountain before the strange static noises in the distance broke the silence. We walked faster. Down the mountain trail ahead of us, a long looming shadow stood there, perfectly still in the midnight. It didn't seem to have eyes, but I could tell that it was staring into us. Like it was transmitting a signal of terror and hatred directly into my skull. My temples pulsed. We looked at each other and bolted the opposite way of it, up the mountain trail. It didn't chase. Suddenly, it was gone again. We stopped, out of breath. I knew I should have never let myself get this out of shape. Travis was hurting too. We stopped to catch our breaths, and after a few minutes, we heard a branch crack in the distance behind us. Both of us looked at each other, and without saying a word, we started moving. As we continued further down the mountain trail, we knew at some point we would need to double back. We were headed up. We needed to make our way down the mountain to our car. I didn't care about our gear that we left behind. I turned around to consider our position. Travis stood in the middle of the trail with his mouth wide open, and he pointed to the top of the nearby tree. Standing on a branch towards the top of a 150-foot tree was an impossibly long shadow of a man. The edges of the shadow were blurry, buzzing almost with static. It hurt my eyes. The weight of the branches could not support anything of that size. It didn't make any sense. We stared back at it, frozen, unable to comprehend it or what to do next. I was tired of running. I took the axe out of my pack. After standing perfectly still, it suddenly moved from one treetop to another so quickly that it almost appeared to teleport. The trees were shaking a bit. It was now hovering right above us in the tree to our right. It made that awful, chittering static noise. Suddenly, the noises began to come from all the trees in all directions. It wasn't alone. We were surrounded, with shadows standing among the treetops, looking down on us. They pulsed and shifted into various shapes. My head pounded from looking at them directly. One smaller figure was perched on all fours, lowered to the ground, right in front of us. It looked like a giant black wolf. Trapped, we turned to bolt further up a small trail, one side of the drop-off with trees and the other side with a mountain wall, and ran maybe 100 feet around the bend. Around that curve, that trail abruptly ended ahead of us. The shadows descended upon us, a sharp cliff overlooking the entire valley below. We turned around. The shuddering, pulsing, vibrating shadows of various sizes stood there, on the trail and in the trees, perfectly still, blocking our way out. And then the noise began again. It was almost like they were chanting it, while someone turned the dial on an old radio. My entire head felt like it was going to explode. It was as if they were able to implant all the most horrible thoughts and feelings I've ever had into my head all at once. Feeling of self-loathing, hatred, loneliness, despair, anger. I wanted to throw myself off the edge of the cliff so badly. I could feel their intention. They wanted to witness our deaths. I turned and walked to the cliff's edge, looking down at the panoramic view below. I spotted a trailhead entrance 100 feet below and far off in the distance. Travis was right behind me. He shouted, "Jonathan, fight it! You're my best friend. You have a family." It broke me free from the barrage of terrible thoughts, and I stopped myself from doing a swan dive over. Travis stood there with a look of pure sadness on his face. I had a flash vision in my brain of Travis suddenly pulling out his gun, putting it to his temple and pulling the trigger, then falling backwards off the cliff. I shoved him hard away from the cliff's edge. The gun! The figures remained staring at us, unmoved. Their noises suddenly stopped. They didn't have mouths, but you could picture their horrible, twisting expressions. The hatred in their absence of eyes, pure darkness. Travis snapped out of his trance, grabbed the gun from his waist, and flipped off the safety, and fired several rounds directly at the perfectly still figures. They didn't move, not for at least a minute. They stayed perfectly still, pulsing, like they were staring into our souls. Then, almost at once, they vanished, tree branches cracking around us. Stunned, we immediately began to descend back down the mountain. As I passed through where the figure stood, my blood ran cold, like I was running through an ice cavern. We slowed our pace, out of breath, and from the corners of our eyes began to notice shadowy figures of all shapes and sizes, twisting and bending, pulsing in the trees all around us. I tried to ignore them, tried to pretend that they weren't there. They were jumping from tree to tree and clicking at that low guttural, throat-clearing static noise. But now it almost sounded excited, like they were celebrating. The noises grew louder and more intense, and all at once. The sadness, anger, and frustration wasted over my entire body, but I had to fight it. We ran down the trail for what felt like hours, occasionally stopping to hyperventilate. The shadow creatures had long disappeared, but the woods somehow looked stranger. Everything was a blur, and nothing seemed real, almost like a vivid painting. I could hear frantic static noises behind us, in the distance through the trees. I saw the trailhead entrance before us. We had finally reached it. I looked up, hundreds of feet above. I saw the cliff edge where we had stood in our standoff, hours before. We fucking made it. We beat you. Suddenly, I felt woozy again. I looked at Travis, who looked like he was trying to scream but couldn't. I froze. I saw the pulsating, shadow-like visions of our lifeless bodies splattered on the edge of the rocks, off the left of the trail, below the cliff. Organs leaking, inbred matter dripping across the rocks. We broke through those horrible visions and ran out the entrance of the trail. We felt victory as we saw our car, hopped in it, and hightailed it out of there. That feels so long ago now, and I'm so tired, so very, very tired. We have been looking for the paved road to signal we have made it out, or even a mountain house, a car, any signs of life. But it feels like we've been driving in circles over and over again. I turned on the radio, but you guessed it, static. I have no idea why this phone is still turned on. I haven't heard a word out of Travis since we escaped the mountains. Come to think of it, he hasn't spoken since right before I had the terrible vision of him killing himself. I hope someone sees this. Please send help. My twin sister Janessa was murdered at the age of 16. I witnessed it like a coward from atop a tree in the forest where it happened. I actually blacked out the memory for a while. I knew she was dead, but I couldn't remember how it happened. It wasn't until I tried therapy that it slowly came back to me. I was also reminded how much my parents used to fight. Our family was planning a camping trip the day before my sister's death. Before leaving, my parents erupted into a massive fight. Janessa and I were looking forward to the trip, and once again our parents' awful communication skills ruined everything before it even happened. We snuck out the house and took a lift to the forest. We left our phones at home, not caring whether our parents would be worried sick. We enjoyed ourselves the first day. I set up our tent, made a fire, had s'mores, and did all the stuff typically associated with camping. The next morning everything changed. I woke up alone in our tent. Outside I hear my sister talking to someone. Inquisitive, I opened the tent and saw someone sitting at our now out campfire who looked just like me. The figure transformed as soon as Janessa realized it wasn't me. Together we ran off. The thing was rushing after us with heavy footsteps. I was faster than my sister and a bit more athletic. I grabbed onto a tree branch and climbed up the tree. Janessa was not so lucky. I watched it happen. I watched that thing tear my sister to pieces. I'm still haunted by her screams. I also understand now why she always appears badly mutilated in my nightmares. I stayed up in that tree overnight, my sister's corpse laying in the leaves. Her remaining eye was staring up at me. While in therapy, there was a moment when I suddenly recalled the hallucination I had the morning of my sister's death. I thought I saw her corpse clawing at the tree where I hid. She wanted me to come down and join her. It caused me to panic and cry out. A couple of men who had been camping in my area heard my screams, and at last I was rescued. My parents don't argue anymore. I hardly see them at all anymore since my sister's death. Over the last couple years, my parents have frequently gone on vacations. They don't tell me where, and I never ask. I usually wake up and find out that they left yet again. I'm out of high school now, and have no career path. I've only really had one thing on my mind since I remembered what killed Janessa. Now I'm returning to that forest where she died, and I'm going after that thing that killed her. I've been preparing for this, and if it's a Wendigo, like I've suspected, then I'm more than ready to take my revenge. This is how I'm doing it. I took a lift again. Had the driver known what I was carrying in my bags, I doubt he would have let me in. As I sat there, the realization of what I was doing grew heavy on me. What the hell am I doing? I've been talking myself up to do this for the last couple years. As much as I wanted a glorious victory, the closer I've come to this day, the more I've started to daydream about dying the same way that Janessa did. As angry as I am with my parents, I don't think they deserve to lose their only remaining child. But I just can't move on knowing that the thing's still out there. My legs were as dense as gold once I tried to exit the cab. The driver watched me awkwardly as I struggled to pull myself out, while putting my backpack on and working to carry the other supplies. Why was I doing this alone? I guess I didn't want anyone else to get hurt in this, but God, I wish I wasn't out here doing this alone. With each step I took into the forest, the more the terror numbed. I was in the domain of the Wendigo now. I wasn't entirely sure how much of the information about them was real. I knew that they could change their appearance. I know that their true form is just like the drawings people have made. There's no way to be an expert on these things unless you actually dealt with one. I'm still not sure why it decided not to come after me. Based on its size, I doubt it would have had any difficulty. Instead, I'm still alive, and crazy enough to come back to pick a fight. As I set up camp, I found myself jumping at the sound of any bird call or movement by any nearby animal. The way I hammered in my tent, I knew I was calling attention to myself. In my left pocket was a gun. Like werewolves, I heard that silver bullets were necessary to kill Wendigos, but what if I was wrong? The thought had been with me ever since I stepped foot back into these woods. I stopped frequently while setting up. Behind a nearby tree, I was almost certain I could see someone watching me, then hiding behind it. I didn't bother to walk over or check it out. I finished up the tent and made up my sleeping bag inside. As I did this, I heard calls that sounded almost human off in the distance. It probably knew I was here. The minutes went by slowly, but soon dusk set upon the forest. I built a fire, like the one Janessa and I had made. I roasted 2 marshmallows. Despite her absence, I made a s'more for her as well, resting it on the sizable rock near the fire. As I ate it, I thought about our last night together. All things considered, it was pleasant. Being twins, we had our moments where we had gotten into arguments like our parents. We'd fought one another. We had our problems. But that night had been pleasant. I'd actually been glad that we decided to camp without our parents. As frightened as I still was, I felt the warmth, not from the fire. A sense of calm came over me, as my memories were suddenly flooded with the good times Janessa and I had. The good times were not for long. I could hear footsteps not far behind me. Jeremy. I could never forget that voice. It sounded like Janessa, but I knew it wasn't her. For some reason I felt compelled to sit there calmly. As it approached, I could tell it was going to take a seat at the rock where I left the s'more. I glanced delicately to my right. I watched as a figure that looked almost identical to the Janessa I remember pick up the s'more and take a bite. That's not yours, I surprised myself by blurting out. The fake Janessa ignored me, continuing to scarf it down. My terror turned to anger. The thing responsible for my sister's death is sitting right next to me, mocking my grief. I didn't wait for it to finish. I pulled up my gun and pointed it directly at the figure. Before I could fire, the creature jumped to the left and turned around. I was stuck with paralysis when I saw the mutilated face of my sister's corpse staring back at me. I'm trapped, Jeremy. I struggled to keep aim. How dare this thing pretend to be her? It won't let me go, and it won't let you go either. We can be together again. It's much nicer than going home to an empty house and unliving parents. She held her hand out to me. Trust me, brother. Please. My trigger finger felt as though struck with a serious case of arthritis. Janessa took a step towards me. Wait, no. It's not Janessa. Why did I suddenly forget that? Feed the forest with me, Jeremy. It's so much better than being dead. Prove it. At last I pulled the trigger. The creature hollered in pain as it fell to the ground. I hit a lung, which wouldn't be enough. I aimed the gun at the heart, but failed to pull the trigger again as it rolled over and jumped back to its feet. Within seconds, it transformed from a corpse of my sister to its massive dark skeletal form with massive antlers. My mind was caught between fight and flight. I stood there aiming my gun, but desperately wanting to flee. As it rushed towards me, I chose the latter option. I rushed over to the bag I had left near my tent. Inside was a weapon that I built myself. As I rushed over, I could tell I wasn't going to outrun it. I fired another shot. The bullet lodged itself into the neck of the beast. It cried out once more, buying me a bit of time to get to the bag. Why didn't I have it unzipped? As I tried to open it, the Wendigo rushed towards me again. Just like the day of Janessa's death, I ran from the campsite, further into the forest, history repeating itself. I wasn't going to fail to avenge my sister. My parents weren't going to lose their last remaining child, all because I couldn't let it go. After at least several minutes, I somehow managed to keep outrunning it. I refused to slow down and look behind my shoulder. As I kept running, I noticed that I had gone in some sort of circle. Up ahead of me was the campsite. I had a chance to grab the bag and pull out the weapon. The closer I came to the campsite, the louder the Wendigo's footsteps became, and I could almost feel the wind as the creature tried to claw me. Once I reached the campsite, I put out my hand, clutching the bag. It felt like almost too great a risk to put the gun back in my pocket, but I needed it free to pull out the weapon. I managed to do this just with my left hand, pulling out the long metal spike. I built it in such a way that the spike would shoot out at a push of a button. The Wendigo wasn't going to slow down until it had me. I had no choice. I had to turn around. I would have to have perfect timing. I had to collect my debt from the creature that took my twin sister. Chew on this, you son of a bitch. I turned around, pressing the button that shot the spike out. Less than a foot from my face was the Wendigo. Its cry so loud it hurt my ears, and they began to ring. I had done it. The spike pierced the heart. Weakly, the Wendigo tried to swipe at me, but somehow lacked the strength. The next part was a gamble. I pulled up my gun and shot it in the head. It wasn't going to be enough to end the Wendigo, assuming what I read was correct. I rushed over to where I dropped the bag. Inside was the silver axe I had also designed myself. When I returned, the creature was still conscious, letting out agonizing cries. I felt no sympathy. I hacked off its wrists first. Its claws were the biggest threat, and I wanted them gone. Despite the weightlifting I've been doing, it took over a dozen hacks to remove the first long-fingered hand. I pulled out my gun and shot it in the head again. It subdued the creature long enough for me to remove the second hand, and then I began on its head. As I began walking up, I again found myself screaming at the creature. I demanded it stay dead, calling it every insulting name that came to mind. Once I had hacked most of my way through its head, I pulled it off. I kicked it a couple feet away. The Wendigo no longer moved. It took about an hour, but I managed to put each limb, the head, and the torso in trash bags that I had brought along. One by one I carried them back to the campsite. I lit another fire, burning each bag. It took until dawn for me to burn the entire body. I left the torso for last. It was a struggle, but I managed to remove the heart, ripped it to pieces, and placed it in a silver box. After locking it, I looked around the site and decided to leave everything except my gun and box behind. I was never particularly religious, but in the months leading up to my fight, I'd gotten to know a priest in a church in my area. Luckily for me, he was there when I arrived with the silver box. His face was several shades paler when I showed it to him. Nevertheless, he escorted me to the back of the church with a pair of shovels and helped me bury it. Once done, I sat there, suddenly flooded with overwhelming emotions. I'd done it. My sister's killer was dead. Its body was burned, its heart in pieces and buried. Janessa, I cried out. I kept my promise. I killed it. The Wendigo can't hurt anyone else. It won't kill anyone else. I placed my lowered head into my hands and continued to cry. I'm sorry I wasn't braver before. I placed some flowers at my sister's grave an hour later. I talked to her tombstone as though she was listening. I like to believe that she was, and that she was pleased with my accomplishment. Afterwards, I returned home and slept through the day and the night. Once the morning came, I heard some noises downstairs. I went down to see my parents were home, sitting down for breakfast. They stopped and looked over at me, saying nothing. I walked over and pulled up a seat. I had no appetite at all. How was your trip? Where did you guys go? My parents exchanged looks before my father replied. We went to go visit your aunt and uncle. Did you enjoy it? I had difficulty keeping my chin from quivering as I lowered my head again. Jeremy, sweetie, what's wrong? Both my mother and father got up and came over to me. Why do you keep leaving me alone? God damn it, I'm your only kid left. Do you not give a shit about me? They hugged me tightly, offering apologies. I could have sworn I felt another pair of hands on my shoulders. The light touch was the most comforting of all. I really hope Janessa is proud of me, but a new task was ahead of me now. A harder task, perhaps. I was going to have to figure out how to reconcile with my parents. Our family had been broken long before her death, but I know with some effort, things could be better than this. I hope she continues to give me the strength to put myself together as I progress into adulthood. I work the late shift at the Majestic Movie Theater in Phoenix. Now don't misunderstand. I don't mean that I work the concession stand from 5 to 10, then go home and get a full night's rest. No, I work the graveyard hours of midnight to 8 in the morning. You see, my local theater has a history of, security problems. Not too crazy, a few break-ins, vandalism, and one guy shot himself in the bathrooms a few years back. Needless to say, all of this made the owner of the theater a little antsy, so he decided to hire some security guards to patrol during the night. Well, security guard. That guard being me. I want you to get a mental image of what you think a security guard looks like. Okay, now, I want you to take that mental image and throw it in the garbage. I didn't wear any type of vest or armor. I don't have a gun. Nor a baton, for that matter. My job isn't to be Rambo. My job is to patrol the theater and make sure that local teens don't break in and paint dicks on the Lion King movie poster. Other than that, if there were to be some actual threat, I've just been instructed to batten down the hatches in the manager's office and wait for the police to arrive. Not that I've ever had to do that. Either way, I don't think that's an option this time. My shift this evening started out simply enough. I made my rounds to the screening rooms, did a quick search of the bathrooms, chased off 2 teens who seemed to think that the back alley of the theater as their smoking ground. After I was sure the 2 youths had scurried off the property, I made it back inside and moseyed my way through the Hall of History, as my boss called it. You see, my boss has a passion for film. He doesn't own the movie theater for the money, though I'm sure he wouldn't complain about that. My boss feels that it's his duty to educate the people of our community about the history of film. So in the hallway that leads up to the screening rooms, there are posters of old movies, with small plaques explaining their importance to the history of film. We also have some older films on Monday nights, our classic nights as my boss calls it, though you might as well call it geezer night, as the only people the classic nights seem to attract are old geezers and ghosts. As I strolled past the old dust-collected posters, I noticed that down the hall, one of the posters was laying face down on the old stained carpet. I immediately felt my stomach drop. If that poster was damaged, it's coming out of my paycheck. I rushed over to assess the damage. I flipped the frame over to see that the glass had cracked. And I'll admit, I jumped a bit. Facing me was Count Orlok's pale, fang-toothed face with text above him reading, "Majestic Theater, 20 cents for children, 35 cents for adults." My unnecessary fear quickly dissipated as I looked up to see that this particular frame poster fell from the horror section. I gave myself a quick chuckle from my self-imposed jump scare and hung the poster back up next to its horror compatriots. I figured that one of the 2 punks outside must have snuck in trying to get some stale popcorn from the concession stand, only to knock over one of the posters and run out the back. All in all, nothing to worry myself with. "Get a dental plan, Orlok," I remember snidely saying, before letting out another small chuckle. I decided that now was a good enough time to take a break from my rounds, so I waltzed my way into screening room number 5, took a long walk down the ramp to the front row of the seats, then plopped my butt down in one of the old, squeaky, barely cushioned chairs. I opened my old, beaten-up lunch bag to reveal a sad, smushed-down turkey sandwich and a few crushed-up potato chips. I quickly devoured my food, wishing that I was actually watching a movie rather than staring at a blank, silver screen in the dark. After I was finished, I let out a long, long sigh. How did it come to this? When I was a child, surprisingly enough, I didn't dream of sleeping half the day away, only to spend the other half guarding some old rundown theater. No, when I was a kid, I dreamt of being a police officer. Not just some security guard, an actual police officer. Hell, it was more than a dream, it was close to reality. As I sat there, crust of my sandwich in hand, and self-pity on my mind, the projector suddenly kicked on. I nearly jumped out of my chair. Do my best to sound authoritarian and be loud enough to be heard over the obnoxious sound of gunfire coming from the screen. I yelled, "Who's up there?" Unsurprisingly, the response I was given was nothing but dead air. I quickly rushed out of the screening room towards the stairway to confront what I was sure to be one of the 2 teens who had come back to prank me. I must admit, I was a little too excited that someone was trespassing in a theater. Finally, this job was going to have some excitement. I rushed up the stairway, eager to catch the trespasser. I ran down the cramped hallway that connected to the projector room until I finally reached number 5. I flung the door open, nearly taking it off its hinges, to reveal nothing. Besides the stacks of discs on the shelves, an old fold-out chair, and the projector busily humming away as it projected the beginning of the latest Fast and Furious flick. There was nothing. Nobody. As I caught my breath from the long run up the stairway, it finally dawned on me what must have happened. You see, these projectors don't need someone to turn them on. They can be turned on manually, but usually, the projectors are set on a timer to begin projecting the movie at the designated showtimes. So, one of the employees must have thought it would be funny to play a prank on me and set the projectors to start playing after hours. I had finally calmed down after the meaningless pursuit and shut off the projectors. I was about to turn around and go about my normal rounds once again, when I suddenly noticed it. The projector room smelled awful. I mean, the whole theater had an off smell about it, but the projector room smelled absolutely awful. It smelled like marsh water and rotten eggs blended together. Suddenly, even more things began to dawn on me. The other employees would have no way of knowing that I would be in screening room number 5 when the projector went off. Someone would have had to see me going into the screening room to know to set that projector off. As I processed all of this, I became aware of one last thing, a dripping noise coming from right behind me. It didn't sound like water dripping. No, it sounded like a thick, oozing liquid slowly falling and pooling on the ground behind me. At this point, I accepted it. There was someone in the room with me. I slowly turned around to face what I assumed would be a mundane trespasser. I wish I hadn't. I wish I would have bolted for the exit the second I noticed that something was amiss. For a moment, I didn't see anything, just the door that I had flung open and the row of filing cabinets. However, I soon noticed it. A set of yellow, cat-like eyes peering at me from atop the cabinets, cloaked in shadow. Gelatinous, gooey drool was pouring down the side of the cabinet, pooling on the floor. Before I had time to process what I was seeing, the beast jumped from its perch atop the cabinets and landed on the floor in front of me with a loud thud. The beast slowly began to stand upright. Its spine made a sickly cracking sound, as if it hadn't stood upright in centuries. The thing was about 7 feet tall, its head almost scraping against the roof of the small projection room. It reached its hand out towards me, if you can call it a hand. Its fingers were far too long and were sharpened to a point. The back of its palm was covered in blisters and boils that looked as if they could pop and shoot out thick pus at any moment. As it reached out towards me, I backed away in sheer fear. This angered it, and in response, it lunged forward, finally revealing its full form under the dim light bulb that buzzed overhead. Now, what I'm going to say next is going to sound crazy. It is crazy, but I know what I saw. And after what I saw tonight, I'm willing to believe that anything is possible. The figure that stood before me was Count Orlok. He had long, pointed, bat-like ears that seemed as sharp as razors. He was completely bald, not a speck of hair on his body. The thick drool continued to pour out of his mouth, making a frothing sound, as it slipped past his sharpened maw of teeth. His skin was pale, stretched, and looked almost paper thin, as if crudely masking a beast even more horrifying underneath. He continued to close in on me, slowly backing me into the wall next to the projector. Whatever this thing was, it was clearly enjoying the amount of fear it was willing inside of me. It towered over me, burying its long, razor-like fingers near my throat. I knew the only way out was through that door. Now the beast was blocking. In a panic, I grabbed a hold of the projector and threw it against the beast's head, completely shattering the projector in the process. He let out a guttural, inhuman screech as I pushed past him and ran down the hallway towards the stairs. As I pushed past him, however, he blindly struck me with his knife-like fingers, leaving a gash along my back. As I ran, I looked back to see him continuing his pursuit. He didn't run like a man, but rather like some wild animal on all fours. Slobber continued to pour out of his mouth in heaps, leaving globs of it behind him as he ran. In my fear, however, I forgot to look where I was running, and before I had time to react, I unexpectedly stepped on one of the descending stairs, losing my balance, and was sent careening down the flight of metal steps. When I finished my tumble, my head slammed into the door that led to the main lobby area of the theater. My head throbbed. My vision began to blur. The last thing I remember seeing before blacking out was his shadow slowly descending the stairs. I awoke sometime later. The first emotion I felt was unrelenting panic. I scanned the room, sure that I would see Orlok's gaping mouth ready to devour me, but I didn't. In fact, I was still at the bottom of the stairway, sitting in a small pool of my own blood that leaked from my back. I breathed a quick sigh of relief, only for a sharp pain to rocket through my body. I had a huge bruise on the right side of my torso, and I had a gash on my head that was bleeding pretty badly. The bleeding on my back, however, had sustained. As I pulled myself off the floor, I began to question what I just experienced. Was anything that I witnessed real? If a blood-hungry monster was really after me, why wouldn't it finish me off when I fell down the stairs? Maybe the gash on my back was from the fall as well. No, that had to be real. Even my mind couldn't come up with something that deranged. I decided to put that all aside for the time being. Whether what I experienced was real or not didn't matter for the time being. I was sure of one thing, that the gash on the back of my head leaking blood was very, very real, and if I didn't get to a hospital, I would have plenty of time to mull over my experience in the next life. I steadied myself using the handrail on the stairs and opened the door to the main lobby area. I managed to limp my way over to one of the cushioned chairs. I caught my breath for a few moments as I sat there, slowly pondering what to do now. Drive to the hospital? No. With this gash in my head bleeding, I'm getting lightheaded, plus my leg is all busted up from the fall. I'm not in a good enough state to drive. No, I had to call the ambulance. I was going to have to call 911. I was going to have to call one of my would-be coworkers for help, as I was going to have to either explain to them that I saw a fictional lord of the night and get locked in the loony bin for the rest of my life, or explain that I simply fell down the stairs and battered my head open for my incompetence and lose my job for being a liability. Yeah, that's me alright, a big liability. I remember how she said it, the sweet psychologist with her curled hair and her pearl earrings. How she tried to stroke my ego by saying I was suited physically for the job. And how she kept her big false smile as she transitioned into saying how I had showed some concerning signs during my psychological evaluation. How she placed her cold, manicured hands on my shoulder and said I should seek further care, and how I would not be accepted into the police force. I would be too much of a liability. None of that mattered now though. I was bleeding in the middle of the crappy theater in the middle of the night. I had to swallow my pride and call for an ambulance. I took out my cheap flip phone and typed in those numbers, 911. The phone rang once, then twice, then once more. For a split second, I almost thought they weren't going to pick up. My fear was quickly vanquished, though, when I heard the ringing finally ceased, and I was greeted with the cold, familiar female's voice of a dispatcher. 911, what's your emergency? Hi. I need you to send an ambulance to the Majestic Theater near Route 5. I've been in an accident, I said, trying to hide my embarrassment over having to call for help. Certainly, sir. What is the nature of your emergency? She said coldly. I'm a security guard here at the theater. I accidentally fell down the stairs and I'm bleeding pretty bad. You fell, sir? The dispatcher said in a confused tone. Yeah, I tripped and fell down the stairs doing my rounds, I explained, irritated by the questioning I was being subject to. There was a moment of silence, and I almost assumed that I lost connection, but after what felt like an eternity, the dispatcher finally spoke. Sir, I'm afraid I can't help you if you don't tell the truth, she said, her voice now monotone in nature. I sat there confused by what she said. What does she mean? I tried to think of a response, and settled on the most intelligent response I could think of. What? Another moment of silence passed, and then she spoke. Sir, I recommend you find somewhere to hide. There's something in the fog. I opened my mouth to try to respond, but as I did, I heard that familiar beep beep of my cell phone. I looked down at the screen that read, Call ended. My blood ran cold as I read the text on the screen. I think everyone knows that the police dispatchers are not supposed to hang up. My mind began to race, and I thought about what she said. What did she mean I was lying? How could she have known that? What was she talking about near the end? What fog? I finally looked up from my phone and saw it. The outside of the glass automatic doors, there was a thick, dense fog. I slowly rose from my chair, gazing out the glass doors. I limped over to the doors, half expecting them to slide open and allow the fog to leak in and swallow the theater whole, but they remained firmly shut. As I limped closer to the door, I noticed the foul smell from earlier had returned, permeating the whole theater. The nausea from the smell and the lightheadedness from the bleeding didn't make walking any easier, but I persisted. After my long trek from my seat to the door, I was finally able to peer out to the parking lot, or where the parking lot would have been. The fog was so dense that it seemed to swallow up everything outside. I could barely see the sidewalk outside, let alone any cars. There was absolutely no way I could drive in the state I was in, and even if I was fit enough, I'd be likely to get lost in the fog and bleed to death before I could even come close to finding my car. I began to turn around, ready to call 911 again, when I remembered what the dispatcher had said. There's something in the fog. That phrase sounded so familiar. Before I had time to ponder on it anymore, I was startled by a sudden wet slap against the glass. I whipped around to see a hand firmly planted against the door. I stared for a moment. The hand didn't move at all. It simply remained smeared against the glass. As I stood there, frozen from both fear and confusion, I let out a single word. Hello? As soon as I did, as if on cue, another hand smashed itself against the glass. Then another. Then 3 more. Soon there was a chorus of palms smashing themselves against the glass, slowly cracking it. Even in my blood loss driven stupor, I could tell that whoever these hands were attached to meant me harm. The hands continued to smack the glass, reeled back, disappearing into the thick gray fog, and then smacked the glass again. I began to limp away from the doors as fast as I could. I tried to think of a route of escape out of the building, but quickly axed that idea. Even if I managed to get outside, I would just get lost in the fog. What would I do then? Just hope someone happens to be out on a stroll at 3 a.m. in the morning in the worst fog Arizona had ever seen and helps me? No. I had to fall back on old habits, get to the manager's office, and batten down the hatches. I limped towards the concession stand and leaned against it, using it for leverage as I walked. I just had to make it to the stairway. I slowly made my way to the door that led to the stairway, all while the hands continued to pound on the glass. Sadly, Lady Luck decided she was going to be in a mischievous mood that night. As I made my way past the soda machine, I stepped in a puddle of Coke and Fanta and slipped, landing back first on the syrupy mess. The fall hurt bad enough, but the soda seeped into my gash on my back and sent a white-hot pain through my entire body. My vision began to blur again, and my ears began to ring. I feared that I might pass out, but my senses returned to me. The first thing I heard after the ringing in my ears subsided was the glass of the automatic door shattering. I heard sounds of wet feet slapping against the tile floor soon after. It took a moment, but I managed to grab a hold of the ledge of the concession stand and pull myself to my feet. In hindsight, I wish I accepted my fate and just closed my eyes. When I got to my feet, I finally saw the source of the hands before me, slowly filing through the shattered automatic door. It was a crowd of lepers, though I very much doubt they were alive. Most of them didn't seem to have a pound of fat or muscle on their bodies. They looked like skeletons with skins simply draped over them. As I pulled in through the doors, some fell, and some had glass shards embedded into their torsos, but this didn't seem to faze them. They just got back up and continued their unrelenting march, their march towards me. I hesitated to turn my back to them, but soon turned and continued my slow limp towards the door, with the gash on the back of my head still bleeding away, and with me barely being able to stand after the abuse my legs had taken. I imagine I looked quite a lot like them. The lepers were slow, but I was even slower. As I made my way to the door, they were slowly gaining on me. If I could just make it. Lady Luck decided to do me a favor for once. I flung the door open and limped my way through the doorway. I turned to grab a hold of the door handle, ready to slam the door closed. I gazed through the doorway. The fog was slowly leaking into the theater. I couldn't see the concession stands, let alone the automatic doors, but I was sure even more of them were piling in. They never sped up, continuing their pursuit of me in a snail's pace. After I was done gawking over the scene before me, I slammed the metal door shut. I leaned against the door and slid down to the floor. I could hear them approaching, but I was sure that this metal door would hold up longer than the glass one did. I sat there for a moment, catching my breath and letting what just occurred sink in. I didn't have much time to rest though, as I soon heard the sound of the fleshy hands smacking against the other side of the door. I rose to my feet and slowly ascended the staircase, holding the handrail for my dear life. Once I reached the top, I stared down the hallway, with the doors lining the wall to the projection rooms, and the lone door at the end of the hallway leading to the manager's office. I half expected Orlok to jump out from one of the projection rooms, but luckily he didn't. I began to limp my way down the hallway towards the office door. As I did, a sudden nostalgic feeling rushed over me. Oh yes, that's why. Walking down the hallway, it reminded me of the day I got rejected from the police force. I remember that walk of shame very well. I walked down the dry, colorless hallway towards the exit sign after the psychologist informed me that I failed my psych test. I remember seeing a few of the other cadets averting their eyes from mine. Others gave me a sad, solemn look. They all must have known that I failed and was just officially rejected. No one stopped me though. No one placed their hand on my shoulder or said it was going to be okay. No one even tried to talk to me. No, they just let me walk out of the station and to my car. And thank God they did. I needed to get out of there quickly. After all, I had just strangled the psychologist to death in the other room. This brings us to right now. I'm currently locked in my manager's office. I managed to stop the bleeding from the gash in my head, but I was still pretty banged up. It's been about 2 hours since I came in here, though for all I know, time might be frozen considering all the supernatural things that have already happened. All he's got in here is some old filing cabinets, a desk, and an old laptop. I've already tried to contact the police on it, but it seems like there's some type of interference that won't allow me to contact them. Whatever is preventing me from contacting the police is most likely the same entity that caused all these monstrosities to appear tonight. As some of you probably gathered at this point, whatever this thing is, it seems to be able to imitate movies, especially horror movies. I don't know what this entity is, or why it decided I needed to die. Maybe it's some type of phantom that's been watching all these movies in the theater since it first opened, and I angered it somehow. Or maybe it's my hand of karma, come to reap vengeance on someone who bears the mark of Cain. Or, who knows, maybe it's the ghost of the guy who shot himself in the bathroom, come to haunt me in the theater, and he just doesn't like me. Why it decided to take form of the movie theater monsters to try to kill me, I don't know. Maybe it's just a sick sense of humor. Now, you may be wondering, if I've been in the manager's office for 2 hours, why hasn't the entity just turned into Orlok again and phased through the door, or transformed into Jason Voorhees, or Jack Torrance and chopped down the door? Again, I don't have the answers, but my guess is it wants me to die a slow death. What do I mean by that? Well, about an hour ago, I smelled that foul smell again. Soon after, a thick pink jelly-like substance leaked through the room underneath the door. The blob. Now, the jelly substance has slowly expanded. It's reached the roof and has been slowly swallowing up furniture in the office, what little there is. It swallowed the filing cabinet first, then the desk, while I was writing this. The filing cabinet has been completely dissolved at this point, and the desk is being digested as I speak. I'm currently backed into the corner, with the jelly slowly spreading across the floor, threatening to envelop the laptop, my only source of communication with the outside world. Then I'll be next. I would like to say that I'm not afraid to die, but I'd be lying. The truth is, I'm scared shitless. I never wanted to die in a shitty movie theater by some Lovecraftian horror. However, I've been going over through tonight's events in my head, and one thing that caught my eye. The dispatcher on the phone, she said she can't help me if I didn't tell the truth. Thinking back, I know that voice of the dispatcher. Oh yes, I knew it all too well. It was the voice of that damn psychologist. So while I sit here with the blob slowly digesting the room I sit in, I wonder, what if by the truth she didn't mean that I needed to admit that I saw Count Orlok, but I need to admit what I've done. If I admitted what I did, will this all end? I mean, if I admit it, it most certainly means that I'll get the death penalty, but it sure beats the slow digestion by the blob. Shit, the keyboard is almost completely enveloped. It's now or never. Look, I know that everything I've said up to now sounds crazy. It is crazy. But if there's one thing that is true, it is this. My name is Tobias Lawrence Martin. On December 9th, 2015, I killed my psychologist named Mary Steele. I did it because I couldn't cope with the fact that I wasn't going to become a police officer. I've been on land for 4 years now, working odd jobs until I finally found a permanent one. I worked the late shift at the Majestic Movie Theater in Phoenix. Do you know that a person can survive without water for only 3 days, but Gandhi was able to survive as much as 21 days without food? Those are the things I used to know as a normal student in a small town. I know none of those things anymore. I just know about rage and feeling constantly hungry. I was in my last year of high school and working a part-time job so I could save up money for higher education. Things were dull, but mostly fine until an otherwise normal afternoon after classes. It happened in the light of day. I was shoved inside a vehicle with expertise. I never saw the faces of the men that took me. I never saw their vans stinking of old blood and rancid food. I could only see the blackness of my blindfold and a taste of slight sweetness of the chloroform before I lost my senses. When I woke up again, I was completely naked in a poorly lit room. The state I was in, it made me expect the worst, but there was no pain or bleeding indicating that kind of violence. It was cold, and there was a maddening dripping sound. Something was gleaming in the dark. As soon as I adjusted my eyes, I realized it was a knife. Drip, drip, drip. The small room had nothing but an already dirty toilet. The knife in the crack in the ceiling, dripping slimy, slightly green water. The walls and floors were gray and featureless. A very strong light, like a camera flash, popped in my face, blinding all my senses with a shock. It disappeared after a moment, and I heard a voice. "We want to watch your suicide. Let's see how long it will take." It took someone unremarkable, frail, with nothing left to live for. But I know I had a purpose. I had to frustrate my captors. If they wanted to watch my suicide, I would have to be the most resilient person in the world. I wouldn't grant their wish. Back then, I didn't know I was being watched by a bunch of sick, twisted people who kept up with the daily misery in the comfort of their own homes and their anonymousness. I slept on the cold, hard floor. Food never came. The only source of water was the murky leak in the ceiling. I drank it, humiliated. It tasted worse than shit, and I would know that since I fed on my own waste during the first few days. The only indication that the day had ended was a blinding flash and the same cold, mocking voice telling me that they were surprised I made it this far. I was so hungry, so hungry. The room was getting hotter from my breathing every day. There was no proper ventilation. It seemed to be just enough to not let me die from carbon monoxide poisoning, a merciful death compared to the one they planned for me. I didn't know why they chose me. I still don't know. I never wronged anyone. I never excelled at anything to be a target of someone's envy. It was just a pointless act of evil. The fact that it was completely random made the hatred grow and, with it, my determination. My stomach hurt beyond words. I was constantly sick from the putrid smells all around me. My body ached all over. My skin was matted and flaky, my hair falling out from malnutrition. I grabbed the knife. I felt watched in cruel anticipation. Not today. I chopped off my left pinky and shoved it in my mouth before I could think too much about it. My own blood dripped down my chest as I chewed on my own bones. The crunchy sound should have been so sickening. My teeth should have been hurting so much, or even breaking, bone against bone. I should have been horrified to defile a part of my own body, but I was just so happy to be eating. After that, I felt my body grow stronger every day. Like a member of the cannibal tribe on Papua New Guinea after ritualistically feeding on the departed loved ones. I laughed manically for hours at a time and trembled endlessly. But I was alive more than I have been in that captivity. I rationed my food and body waste. I needed my right hand, so it would be crucial to spare at least 4 fingers on it. But I was free to feed on my left hand. My toes were pretty much useless. I'd been dragging myself on the floor to move anyway, but I didn't need to feed on myself for long. No more than a week after I first took a bite of myself, the voice after the blinding flash had something else to say. "We're selling you." The official story is that I miraculously escaped my perpetrators during their flawed operation to move me to my new owner. And by the time I reached a neighbor and the police were called, they had already fled the crime scene. The investigation was kept very quiet, so it didn't make world news. Hell, I only made the local news as local teenager mutilated by unknown man. Someone even donated me a prosthetic hand. The police were able to take down the website where my daily torture was being streamed nonstop, and just then I found out that I was a star. I laughed for days because everyone felt so bad for me, not knowing that the torture I endured was way beyond losing a hand or a few toes. I laughed for days because I know the truth and no one else does. I know how. Right when they opened the door to my prison, my body felt like it was possessed by a bestial creature, and before I know it, I used my superhuman strength to crush the bones of 5 men all at once. Then I ate their flesh, corpse as well. I even licked the leftover blood from the walls before I opened the doors and headed to the closest house, dragging my bad foot. In that moment, I felt like I was the co-pilot of my body. The wheelsman was a voice screaming, "Kill and devour." I could have never escaped if something hadn't taken a hold of me. I'm not strong or even fast. I'd do anything to spend the rest of my life quietly, having my body, mind, and soul heal and recover from a devastating trauma. The problem is that eating raw flesh of my captors was the most pleasant experience I've ever had in my life. And while I've been chasing mercilessly all the monsters that watched me suffer for their own enjoyment, I'm too hungry. Their tainted flesh has not been enough for me. No, for us. As a kid, I lived with neglectful parents at best. At worst, Dad would turn his screams and fists on me, but I've learned quickly how to dodge the worst of it. Mom wasn't much help. She'd just smoke in the kitchen and bitch at him for staying out so late. At the time, we basically lived in the middle of nowhere. Our nearest neighbor were a long walk away for a 6-year-old, and we had trees between us. No one to run to for help. But I was a pretty small kid at my age. I learned that I could fit pretty much anywhere. The closet, dryer. I think even once I tucked myself under the futon in such a way I could still get some air, but no one could see me. I was a master at hiding, but not for a good reason. One night I chose to do something different. I could hear it in my dad's yells. He was pissed and was about to get violent. Mom wasn't helping either, just piling fuel onto the inferno of a flame. I knew I had to find a good hiding spot. I had gotten an idea a few days before when I realized that the lattice covering the bottom half of our porch had a hole in it. Not big enough to fit a full-grown man, most likely, but I could fit my skinny 6-year-old in there no problem. So wrapping myself in my blanket and grabbing my hippo stuffy, I snuck out the window and ran into the backyard. In the middle of autumn, when it was 40 degrees out and temperatures were steadily dropping. I crawled under the porch, scraping my elbow and getting splinters in my palms, but I fit inside. It was actually quite spacious compared to most of my hiding spots. I couldn't sit up all the way, but I had plenty of room to spread out my limbs. Of course, I was getting covered in dirt. It had rained a few days ago, so the mud was still a little wet. I wrapped myself in my blankie the best I could and settled in for the night. But soon, even with my blankie and my hippo, my teeth were chattering so hard and I could barely breathe. I didn't want to go back inside, knowing that if my dad caught me, I'd be in for the whipping of my life. So I just toughed it out. "Honey, are you cold?" The voice was not the voice of my mother, scratchy from all the smoking and screeching she did. It was sweet, like honey. I turned over to see a dim outline of a woman lying on her stomach next to me. She had a pretty butterfly necklace and was dirty like I was. I nodded, not wondering how she'd been down there without me noticing. The woman belly crawled forward and wrapped her arms around me, and I suddenly became warm, like I was sitting next to a campfire. I snuggled in her arms, not minding the mud. After all, we were both dirty. "You've gotten so big," the woman said, examining my face. "How old are you now, Alex?" 6. How did I know this woman again? I didn't think I did. 6? The woman gasped. "You're all grown up then. I'm so happy." She sighed pleasantly and stroked my hair. I had never felt so cozy in my life. "What's your name?" I asked. She smiled. I could hear it in her voice. "I'm Lily. What's your favorite things to do?" I had to think for a second. I like board games and coloring. Lily chuckled. "Just like me then. Could never get enough of Scrabble. But I guess you're still young to play that, huh?" I nodded. "I want to play it though. I like the tiles. Would you play with me?" I heard Lily sharply inhale. I don't think I can. Your daddy put me under here, and I can't leave, but..." She thought for a second. "Alex, could you do me a favor?" "Of course." This lady was so nice, why wouldn't I do her a favor? "When you wake up in the morning, go to the police station. Ask for the officer named Lowell Joyce. Tell him where you can find Lily, okay? Underneath your back porch. He will come and get me, okay? And then maybe we can play Scrabble." Yippee! I was too excited at the possibility of playing Scrabble to notice how Lily's voice caught at the end. I nodded vigorously. "I'll do it. We can be on the same team, right?" Lily softly laughed. "I'll help you understand the rules. Good night, Alex." When I woke up the next morning, I heard Lily's voice. "Go now. Your dad's gone at work. I'll tell you how to get to the station." Rubbing my eyes, I crawled out from underneath the porch and went to my house to grab my shoes and coat. I shivered in the frosty cold, but I thought Lily was right behind me. After my shoes and coat were on, I started walking. It was long enough to get to the neighbor's house. I can't remember how long it took to get to the police station. Although I have no idea why no one pulled over to see what the hell a 6-year-old in his dirty pajamas was doing walking alongside the road. But Lily kept guiding me onward. Wait. Okay, cross the street now. Turn right here. Keep going, you've almost made it. I nearly collapsed with exhaustion by the time I walked into the station. The guys were in the front chatting and having a good time and didn't see me until I was almost at the front desk. Whoa, kid. You okay? One of the officers knelt down to my level, eyes wide. I nodded. I'm okay. Can I speak to Lil Joyce? One of the officers picked me up. Sure, kid. Sure. Let's go get you someplace warm. Holy shit, your lips are blue. I remember quietly scolding the man to watch his language. Shit was a bad word. I was given some warm cocoa and wrapped up in a blanket by the time the old man with a graying mustache sat by me. Hey kid, I'm Sheriff Joyce. What's your name? Alex. I sat down my cup and looked him straight in the eye. I was told to tell you that Lily is under my back porch. You need to go and let her out so she can play Scrabble. I had never seen a grown man turn pale before. Lots of things blurred together at that point. I remember being taken back to my house and there were a lot of police cars and people around. The back porch was surrounded by yellow tape and someone was taking a black bag away while my dad was in handcuffs. After that, I lived with my grandparents, which were Sheriff Joyce and his wife. I tried to ask him what happened and who Lily was, but I always got shut down. I was too young to know. But life got better, a lot better. Grandpa was the best man I could have hoped for in my life. We went out on weekends, to the movies, where he let me have a giant soda even though I had to pee in the middle of the movie. When I asked him if I could drink when I was 13, he let me try beer. I spat it out and didn't touch it again. He never judged me for my love of art, letting me paint my whole bedroom multiple times over the years. I felt safe around him. He never laid a hand on me. My grandmother was amazing too. Over the week she would homeschool me, along with teaching me things that you wouldn't learn in school, such as how to respect others and not to take their crap, and cooking, lots of cooking. I could make my own birthday cake by the time I was 12, but I usually made them for my friends. I had a lot of those after I was free from my dad. When I turned 16, Grandpa took me back to my dad's house. The whole thing had been bulldozed over, but I could still see some yellow tape wound around a few of the trees, faded and torn. We sat on the back of his truck. He had opened a beer and drank half of it before setting it down and grabbing me an orange soda. After I drank it, he told me, Lily was your mother. Good thing he didn't tell me when I was drinking. I would have had it coming out of my nose. My mom? I questioned, confused. Your actual mom. The woman that you lived with your dad was not your mother. My granddad grabbed another beer. Lily was my daughter. I loved her so much. But when you were around 6 months old, she vanished. My stomach dropped. My dad just imprisoned her under the porch? I asked, starting to feel sick. Grandpa took another deep breath before setting the unopened beer down. That's something I'll never be able to understand. Lily told you to find me and that she loved Scrabble? Yeah. She kept me warm that night. I would have probably frozen to death if she hadn't been there. I was the stupid kid, even I knew that. Grandpa went dead quiet before he opened the beer and slammed the whole thing. Alex, Lily had been dead the whole time she was gone. When we dug her up, she was bones. Experts confirmed it, and your dad confessed what happened. They had gotten into a fight and he threw her down the stairs, and she broke her neck. He clenched his fist. I knew he had something to do with her disappearance, but I never had proof until you walked into my station, covered in dirt, telling me that she was under your porch. I was floored. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was shake my head. But I saw her. She was alive. She had a butterfly necklace. I trailed off, and Grandpa pulled out the evidence baggie from his pocket. There was a butterfly necklace, all right, rusty and parts of the paint chipped off. But I remembered it clearly, as I remembered Lily's voice. Grandpa took a shaky breath as he pressed the bag into my hands. Lily loved you so much. It's why she stuck around with that bastard. You were her whole world. She was constantly taking pictures of you and sending them to us in the mail. Sometimes a mother's love can accomplish things that no humans can do. My eyes overflowed with tears as I clutched the necklace to my chest, choking on sobs. I leaned against my grandpa. He held me tight, and I swear I felt a few of his tears hit the top of my head. And just for a brief moment, I swear I felt the warm love I felt that night under the porch. I had always been aware of the deep web. You hear the craziest, most messed up stories from people who have enough balls to explore it. Websites that involve human experimentation, hiring a hitman, and watching people through their own security cameras. It's fucked up. But honestly, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't slightly interested. Now, just to point out, there's no malicious intent behind my exploration of the deep web. I was just curious to see if it was really as bad as people said it was. The first thing I stumbled on was a website extremely centered around death, which gave me a really uneasy feeling, so I didn't really hang around that webpage very long. It takes quite a bit to freak me out, so it's safe to say I was a little surprised that I couldn't even stomach the first website I clicked on. But hey, it's not supposed to be unicorn and rainbows, right? Next, I clicked a website that was dedicated to watching people through security cameras. Most of the screens showed empty living rooms and patios. Some of them showed oddly filled rooms, like rooms that were packed with stuffed animals, and another that was eerily decorated with fucking Christmas lights and fake Santa Claus statues. Another screen showed a young woman doing yoga. That one had a lot of views, but I didn't watch that one very long. Something inside me just felt ill and just wrong. Like what I was doing was sickening. I shook my head, blinking away any more curiosity before I hovered the mouse over the tiny X to close the window. Right before I pressed the mouse, I saw a blue link under the black screen that said, "Proceed with caution." I bit down on my back teeth, yelling internally to leave the page and don't click the link. It's not worth it. It could be murder. Would that make me an accomplice? What if someone was skinning an animal or some shit like that? But then again, what if it wasn't? I don't know what the hell propelled me to move my mouse away from the window and hover over the link instead, but that's where I ended. My curiosity always got the best of me, and no matter how twisted my stomach felt or how strong the feeling of dread was that lingered right over my head, I had to know. I really just had to know where the link led to, or it would drive me crazy until I finally found out. So, I pressed my mouse down and watched the link turn purple. I felt my mouth go dry as I watched the screen slowly loading. Page was comprised of a large screen, like a security camera page, only just one. The room was concrete and was dark. There must have been a night vision camera or something, but everything was a weird blue-green tinge. But you could tell that there was little to no light. There was a dark liquid on the floor, in a medium-sized puddle. I told myself it was gasoline. Don't ask me why. Movement in the far right of the screen caught my attention, and I immediately perked up in my desk chair, inching my face closer to the screen of my laptop. It looked like an arm, like someone's forearm. They're standing there, not really moving, but subtly swaying, just enough not to look completely still. "Hey," I said, before shaking my head and slapping my mouth shut. Stupid. Then, the person walked. They walked towards the left of the screen. I felt my stomach knot, felt my throat tingle and tighten, bile raising up the back of my throat. I knew my mouth was open, gaping, and my eyes were wide, face screwed up into an expression of pure disgust. It was a young woman. She looked like she couldn't have been older than 25 or so. Long, dark, and dirty hair, in tangles, like she'd been pulling at it. Her leg was dragging. Her other skinny leg was doing most of the work as she limped weakly. Her head was down, looking at the floor. The sound of her dragging her foot across the concrete echoed in my silent room. I didn't think it could get any worse. I was so fucking wrong. Suddenly, the woman raised her head, and it looked like it weighed a ton on her teeny body. I hadn't noticed it before, only able to barely make out the side of her profile, but now it was clear as day. She looked around, her eyes watering with tears and black makeup streaming down her face. Small strands of bloody thread were entwined in her lips, messily tied, locking them together. Dark blood stained her chin, probably from where she tried desperately to open her mouth, to scream, before realizing she couldn't. Her dainty fingers were stained as well, the same color as a puddle on the concrete. My whole body felt weak. My stomach was sick. I tried to tell myself it was fake, that this was all a big hoax. My eyes scanned to the bottom left of the screen. 5,623. There were 5,623 people watching this. Unable to fight it any longer, I ran to the bathroom, puking inside my toilet bowl. Everything in me felt disgusting, wrong, and just twisted. Once I was finally done, I laid on the floor in the bathroom, letting the cool tiles try to soothe my burning body. My head was spinning. I kept repeating to myself over and over again in my head that I shouldn't have clicked that link. I should have left. I should have closed the fucking window and told my inner curiosity to fuck itself. Instead, I'm laying on the floor, the bathroom reeking of vomit, and my mind in a complete mess over what the hell I was supposed to do. Should I get the link and send it to the police? Should I call them now? My first instinct was to copy and paste the link, just in case, then call the police and inform them of what just happened. Maybe they could trace the IP address or something. Maybe they would recognize the girl and know where to start looking. Maybe I could save their life. I would feel really dumb if this was fake, just to get viewers. But I wasn't about to gamble, not with what was at stake. I ignored the dizzy feeling flooding my head as I jumped up, grabbing the doorknob and twisting it a bit too harshly. When I flung the door open, my phone buzzed in my pocket, scaring the living shit out of me. I stopped mid-panic and picked up with a shaky hand. I saw my girlfriend's name and immediately slid to answer. My voice was a complete wreck, my eyes finding the screen where the girl shrunk down to the ground. The sound of her cries all around my room, making my body feel rigid. I had nothing to throw up, but I still felt sick. Madeline, you're not gonna believe what I just fucking saw. What? Are you okay? Have you been crying? No, I'm not okay. Averting my eyes to the screen. I know you said to stay away from the deep web, but are you kidding me? Her voice went from caring to mad in a split second. I told you to stay away from that place. You never listened to me. You never fucking do. There's a girl, I said weakly. She's trapped in some basement. Her mouth is sewn shut. There's blood all over her face. I don't know what to do. Madeline. The girl's cries got louder, more desperate, but muffled. I'm so sorry. Close it out, clear your history, and never go back there again. I'm not kidding. But should I call? No. Her voice was stern now. You don't know if it's bullshit. It's probably staged to gain disgusting viewers, apparently like yourself. People do it all the time. That's why I said it's best that you stay away from there. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble. I didn't say anything, wordlessly walking over to my desk. My hands shook as I raised the mouse to the small X once more. My eyes watched as the number of viewers slowly ticked higher and higher before I closed the window. I felt even worse than before. Okay, we can report them tomorrow, just in case. But for now, just go to sleep and stay the hell away. I can't believe you went there in the first place. I didn't have the energy to argue with her. Guilt plagued my whole body, drowning me. It was all I could feel. I told her goodnight, that I was sorry and I loved her, before I hung up and made my way to the couch to sleep. Or try to sleep. I didn't feel right, not while that girl was still trapped, unable to scream for help, unable to talk at all. I know it could be fake, but was that a risk I was willing to take? I looked up some Google searches over what is fake on the deep web, and I read multiple stories about staged webcam videos, which made me feel a bit better. It didn't make the sick, guilty feeling go away, though. It's safe to say I didn't get much sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, or even began to drift off, I would see the woman's face, the thread laced into her lips, and the blood staining on her mouth, her fingers, and the floor. I continued to grow more anxious and uneasy, deciding to maybe get out of the house. Heading over to the local CVS and picking up some melatonin might help. I threw my blanket off, slid my shoes on, and grabbed my keys and wallet from the nightstand. The cool air felt amazing and did wonders to calm my whirlwind of thoughts in my head. I went to check the time, realizing I left my phone at home. Not a huge deal. The store was only a few minutes away from my house. I ended up buying melatonin and a stronger sleeping pill just in case that didn't work. I also got a pack of bottled water to help rehydrate after I vomited all the contents from my stomach earlier. By the time I got home, I felt much better, which lasted about 3 seconds before I noticed that my front door was wide open. Now, I may have been in a state of shock or panic, but I never ever would leave my front door open or even unlocked. My heart immediately began to race. I got out of my car, closing the door quietly, and unlocking my trunk and grabbing a crowbar that I kept in there. "Who's there?" I yelled into the house, waiting for any noise. "Who is in there?" My own voice was shaking and weak. I was met with complete silence, keeping the crowbar up, ready to strike. I walked to the couch and felt for my phone. As soon as I found it, I hit the emergency button and waited till I got a hold of 911, letting the operator know that I think someone had broken into my house. She told me that the police were on their way. After checking around the house for anything odd, I decided to give my girlfriend a call, letting her know what happened. The phone rang and rang and rang some more. After getting the voicemail, I hung up, knowing that she was probably asleep since this was late at night. I waited about 20 minutes or so for the police to show up, and walked them in like a scared puppy as they checked every room. They ended up having me just fill out a report, and they would keep a patrol car in the area just in case someone else gets hit. As they were leaving, I checked to see if Madeline had called back yet, but there wasn't any missed calls. I, however, did notice several outgoing calls to her cell phone at 3:12, 3:14, 3:17, and 3:20, and another one at 3:56, which was around the time I had gotten home. My mind went into automatic panic, knowing the fact that I did not make these calls. I quickly checked my text, reading that I apparently sent her a text at 3:23. "Hey, can't sleep, coming over. Mind leaving the back door unlocked so I can get in?" I didn't send that message. My stomach dropped. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. And I noticed a reply directly underneath. "Sorry, I was sleeping. Thanks for waking me up, by the way. Lose your key again? It's unlocked. Don't be too late." Without a second thought, I jumped, running to lock all the doors and windows in my house, keeping the crowbar tight in my hand as I ran to my car. I drove as fast as my little Civic would allow me to, all the way to her house, ignoring any stoplights. It only took me 3 minutes to get there, but I still knew I would be too late. I made my way to her back door, feeling every cell in my body burn when I saw it wide open. My face was hot, my hands were shaking, but I stepped in, crowbar raised like a bat, ready to swing. I tried to keep my emotions at bay as I looked around the dark house. "Madeline," I called out. "Are you okay, babe?" Nothing, just silence. "Madeline!" A small scream came from her bedroom, just up the stairs. My legs jerked to run as I flew up the stairs, slamming her door open. I looked at her empty bed, her empty room. Confused, I heard her scream again, only this time, I heard it was coming through her computer monitor. I felt numb as I looked at the screen, noticing the same website I saw earlier. Only instead of one woman, I saw two. The first was laying on the floor, not moving, in the puddle of dark liquid. I recognized the second girl, just as I had recognized her voice. My heart shattered as I saw her face, streaked in blood. The same threading was sewn into her eyelids, locking them shut. Her screams hit my bones, surrounding my body. It's all I could hear. Her face was twisted in pure horror, I cried as her voice was beginning to go out and continued to grow weaker and more rasped. I locked my jaw, picking up my cell phone and dialing 911 for the second time. This time it only rang once before a deep, gravelly voice from another man answered, "You shouldn't have called." Chills shot down my body, and I heard the phone hit a thud as it hit the carpeted floor. My breath hitched in my throat, and I bent over to pick it up. Hanging up the call and racing downstairs. How did he do that? How did he redirect my call away from the police? I felt my heart race as I darted to her back door. In a frenzy, I sprinted to the closest house. I pounded on the door, screaming on the top of my lungs, until the neighbors opened it. Her face was tired, confused, and scared. She let me in, and I explained in frantic tears what happened. I'm typing this on my phone as we both get a hold of the cops, but neither of our cell phones are going through, and neither was her landline. I think someone is messing with our signal, and they may have cut her line. But we're gonna keep trying. I'm scared for me, I'm scared for my girlfriend, and I'm scared for her neighbor. I don't know what's gonna happen to me. If you don't hear from me again, please take this advice and experience to heart. Stay away from the deep web. I worked in security at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work, as obviously there are some pretty strict rules and things employees can't put online, but I just don't think I could tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20, I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters, and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there would be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere else, with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While the working conditions were 110% better, as far as the climate and the comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestic. I guess the expensive and stress of a vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom or dad were yelling at each other. I would try to suggest that they would take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out while I still have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently a couple days before that, housekeeping had went to a room that should have been turned over that day. Turnover is when a guest leaves about 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. But when housekeeping arrived, all of the guest items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on. But during the next few days, when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to go check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything that a family would need on vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family. A dad, mom, and 2 little kids. I tried calling the phone number that they had given us, but all I got was voicemail. We were all stumped, so I made the call that the housekeeper should clean the room, and that we would take all the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all their stuff. I found out that the family had paid a parking fee on their vehicle. Description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots, and I easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out that they got in a car accident, or them just deciding to leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day that they arrived, they got here late and probably stayed on the resort. The next day, they used 2 credits in Epcot. The second park day, they used just 1 credit at the Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now at Disney, there's something called magic bands. Magic bands are worn by guests, and they act like a room key, a parking ticket, a credit card, dining reservation payment, and a fast pass, which is a system used to bypass a line. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day that they had went to the Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride. It's a Small World, around 11 a.m., then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring someone else in on this. I called a co-worker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they rode it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he had found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The footage showed me them scanning their bands to use the fast pass for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage on the exit of the ride just showed the other people in the car exiting. They weren't there. Of course we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and the mom and dad and the other kid had gotten off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed or stuck in the machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride. Middle of the damn day. We turned off all the music and turned up all the lights. Me and my buddy walked the ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there were close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was stumped. I've kept digging for the past couple days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found to next. I've called the police, and I suppose they're on their way. But the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some sort of warning. I kept digging into the reservation over the last couple days, and today, and I noticed that they had purchased a memory maker. There are photographers all over the parks, and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with a memory maker, these photos are all free. They automatically get added to each guest's Disney account when the system sees that their picture has been taken, and the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up the memory maker photo album, and I swear, there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so were pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides, in front of the castle, but the rest were all in It's a Small World. The ride only takes 1 picture per go-around, so it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty, except for this little family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10 or 15, I can see the dad getting angry and yelling. The mom is holding on to those 2 kids like her life depended on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying, and it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out. But in the very next one, they're all right back in the damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely, I can see the dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just the mom and 1 kid, another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think that they are still alive, just damn near catatonic, looking straight ahead, pale. And I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures I can tell that they aren't where they should be. I even saw one of the dolls in the car with a family. I can't look anymore, or I'm gonna lose my lunch. I closed the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on the security camera that the local PD has just arrived, and they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck was going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed on my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I'm gonna walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to where the family vanished to. They didn't vanish. I know where they are. I've been on my knees trying to scrub up all this blood and scraps of paper for the last half hour. I'm making some progress, but it's slow, and I keep having to stop when my hands start shaking too much. I'm out of my apartment for the moment, sitting on the floor in the hallway, and I can feel my nerves starting to settle some. I'm going to write this out so I'll have it all on record, and also so I can wait a bit before having to go back in. It started when I was bored yesterday. The internet was out in my apartment. After casting for a couple of hours and trying to read or do some cleaning, I was out of ideas to entertain myself. That's when I saw the box of stationery paper on my desk. My Aunt Emma had given me the stationery as a birthday gift the week before, and there's nothing inherently wrong with such a gift. It was a box of high quality paper and envelopes personalized with my initials at the top of the sheets of paper and on the back fold of the envelope. As a 70-year-old man, I would have probably thought it was cat's pajamas, but I'm a 25-year-old man, so not so much. But still, I was very bored, so I sat down at my desk and started messing around with it. At first I tried writing as neatly and fancy as I knew how. My handwriting is horrible. My best efforts looked like a slow 4th grader, as opposed to a slow 2nd grader. But it was something to do. Then I doodled for a bit, but my drawing skills were equally lacking. I was feeling myself getting drowsy, but then a thought occurred to me of what I should do with the stationery. I'd write a letter to myself. It was a stupid idea, but I thought it was kind of funny too. So I took out a clean sheet of paper and set to work. Hey Scott, how are you doing today? My day was kind of boring. Christy is out of town visiting her parents, and the internet is dead. I have zero ideas of what to do with myself. This is lame. Goodbye. Sincerely, Scott. The novelty of the idea had clearly worn off quickly, but I did fold it up and stick it into an envelope at least, even going as far as to address the letter to myself. Standing up from the table with a sigh, I lay down and fairly soon fell asleep. When I woke up, it was early evening, and the room was dimly lit by the fading twilight outside. I reached over and turned on my bedside lamp, blinking at its brightness. I hated taking naps. I always felt groggy afterwards, and I always had trouble sleeping later on in the night. Rubbing my eyes, I roll over discontentedly and began getting up. When my eyes lit upon my desk, I sat back down. The envelope with the letter I had written is different now. It was in a different spot for one, but I could tell from the bed it was also a different color and looked like it had a small stain in one of the corners. Standing up and going to my desk, I looked at the envelope closer before picking it up. My name and address were still on the front, but hadn't I written it smaller and more centered than that? Regardless, the envelope itself was definitely different, so clearly I hadn't written this at all. The next thought was that someone came into my apartment to either prank me or try to scare me. The obvious answer was Christine. It didn't really seem like something that she would do, but she was the only other person with the key. After I did a quick sweep of the apartment for intruders, I texted her. She swore that she was still half a state away, and she sent me a picture for proof. She also seemed worried and asked if I had called the cops. But I wasn't at that point yet. I needed to look inside of that envelope first. I pried it open carefully and peeked inside, seeing a light blue piece of paper that matched the envelope and was different than the cream-colored paper that I had used this afternoon. When I unfolded it, I was surprised to see it really looked like my handwriting. But it wasn't the same letter. Instead, it seemed to be responding to me. Good to hear from you. I've been watching you when I can for years, and it seems like the universe has finally given us a way to talk. I'm guessing you live in apartment 3B on Nesbitt Street in Baltimore, right? And your Uncle Tom gave you the box of stationery for your birthday? It's so weird. I guess things have to line up just right. If it actually works and you're reading this, I know it will probably come to you as a shock. I don't think your side knows about us like we know about you, but that's cool. We can swap stories. I'll keep it short for now, but I hope to hear from you again soon. Glory and peace, Scott. I read the letter 3 times. I really couldn't tell that I didn't write it, other than the content itself, which was decidedly weird. Whoever was doing this was either a good prankster, or I had a dedicated stalker that had taken the time to learn my handwriting. Either way, I was calling their bluff. Hey man, good to get a response. So are you like in some other world? That's crazy. Tell me some facts about your world and we can compare. And if you have some kind of souvenir that you can send next time, that'd be awesome. Looking forward to the next letter. I put the new letter in an envelope, addressed it, and set it on my desk. I then took out my tablet, plugged it in, and set the camera to record at an angle where I could see my desk and the door to my bedroom. I thought about just sitting there and waiting, but the idea was too tedious and would make it less likely that anyone would come back. That was assuming that this wasn't some kind of one-shot joke or harassment. But time would tell. Either way, I decided to go grab something to eat and to go see a movie. 4 hours later, I returned home to another blue letter. I understand you're skeptical, thinking this is all a joke, right? Well, here's some info like you asked, and I sent along something that might help convince you. Our world is a lot like yours, though it's different in some ways. About 40 years ago, we had a lot of animals start dying off. Not all of them, of course, but most of the birds, all of the dogs, and a few other species here and there. Still don't know why, but around that same time, we lost our mirrors. What I mean is, our mirrors stopped showing our reflections. A lot of them just went dark, but some of them, where they have twins in your world, would show your reflections instead. We knew it was reflections because all the writing was backwards, and I could tell from your letters that you don't actually write backwards anyhow. But after that, a lot of people started changing, getting weird or violent. It's stabilizing some now, but it was really bad when I was younger. A lot of people died. Anywho, like I said, things are a lot better now, though we do have some odd stuff pop up and people go missing some. Is your world like that? From what I've seen, and what I know studies people on our side have done, observing active mirrors, it seems like things are a lot better over there. If so, I'm kind of jealous. But enclosed you'll find one of our nickels. It has Robert Kennedy on it. He was president from 1969 through 1977. I don't know for sure, but I think he's one of the big differences between your place and mine. Right back soon. I looked at the back of the envelope and found a nickel tucked in the corner. On one side it had a man's profile, with the name Robert F. Kennedy listed under it. On the other side, it looked like a large turkey glowering over a shield bristling with spears and covered with stars and stripes. What the fuck? I remember my tablet and checked the footage. It actually stopped recording after 2 hours, but it was enough. At the 42-minute mark, I watched my cream envelope give a shudder and disappear. 30 minutes later, a blue envelope had faded into existence a few inches over on the desk. I wasn't sure what to do at this point. I thought about asking Christine for advice, but it would be too hard to explain over the phone, and I didn't want her to worry. I could call the police, but what good is it gonna do? Even if I showed them the video, they probably would think it was fake and I was a jackass wasting their time. I don't know if I believed everything the letter was saying, but I couldn't deny the evidence was compelling. And if this guy really was another me, it could wind up being something really great. I might even become famous for discovering some parallel dimension. But first things first, I needed to write another letter. Wow, so this is big news, right? You're saying that you can see us through the mirrors? Well, that's kind of embarrassing. Could you hear us too or just see us? Do your people have theories on how this happened? Have other people in your world had this happen where they could talk to people from my world? I'm very curious, need to know more. This time I watched as my letter disappeared, only to be replaced with another response a short time later. Yeah, you've got a lot of questions. I understand. No, we can't hear, just see. I don't know if anyone else has actually communicated like this before. No one knows why my world's changing so much. When the other things started appearing last year, people said it was the end of the world. That we were being judged. But people are just going crazy, you know? I don't believe in all that stuff. Things are changing and we just had to change with it. Hey, did you say you have a Christine? Is she that hot blonde girl there? She's your girlfriend? I didn't like the tone of the new letter. And I had even more questions now. but I wanted to keep talking to him, so I tried to respond in a way that would make him happy. Yeah, she's my girlfriend. She's great. We're planning to get married next year. Do you have a Christine too? Tell me more about your world when you can. My letter shuddered away fairly quickly, and I waited for an answer, but none came. It was getting late, so I eventually went to bed, though I would wake up periodically and check my desk. Around 6 in the morning, I saw a blue envelope, and I jumped out of bed to read the 2 lines written there. I do have a Christine, but she's a fucking whore. I had to punish her. I hope yours isn't a whore too. I was done. I didn't know what this was, but I knew it had to be real, and I was feeling more and more like it was dangerous. Throwing the letter down, I started looking around my room. I saw a small mirror I had hanging in the back of my closet and yanked it down quickly, hearing it crack as it hit the floor. I tried to think of any others, and the only ones that came to mind were in the bathroom and the one that Christine hung over the mantel in the living room. Christine! I looked at my phone and saw that it was almost 7. She was going to be back in town this morning, probably coming straight here. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail, like it was powered off. I didn't have her parents' number, so I had resorted to leaving her a voicemail and a text telling her not to come by my apartment, that I would meet her at hers when she got back. I debated on what to do until she arrived, but ultimately decided that I couldn't stand being in my apartment by myself. So I left a note on the door saying, Christine, don't go into the apartment, call me instead. I'll explain and meet you. And I left the building. For the next few hours, I basically drove a circuit between our 2 apartments, occasionally parking outside one place or another. I was sitting outside her place when I got a call from her phone. It was her mother. She said that Christine had knocked her phone into the toilet, getting ready for bed last night, and that they had put it in a bowl of rice to dry out. When Christine left to come back home a few hours ago, she must have forgotten it. I felt my mouth go dry. Her mother was asking me what she should do to get Christine her phone, but I told her I'd have to call her back and hung up. Based on when she left, she should have been back at least an hour ago. At that point, I knew she wasn't at her apartment, so I sped over to mine. I saw her car parked down the street from my place, and my head started pounding. Running up the stairs, I reached the door and saw that the note that I left was gone. In its place was a blue sheet of nice stationery bearing a drawing of a red-ink tart and the words, "Come on in my handwriting. I started yelling her name as I fumbled the door open, but as I entered I could tell she wasn't there. The apartment felt empty and lifeless. I ran into the bedroom, stumbling to a stop at the doorway. My mind had difficulty making sense of what I was seeing at first. On the wall next to my desk, there were strips of paper plastered to the wall, making an outline of a small door, about 3 feet tall. The strips seemed to be a combination of blue and cream paper. Speckled here and there were spots of crimson and soggy near the baseboard, where there were partially bloody handprints on both sides, as though someone was trying to hold on. Leading away from the paper door was covered with more blood. As I looked closer, I could see several thick runnels in the wood that I thought first were scrapes or cuts of some kind by something heavy being dragged. But then I saw one of Christie's bloody fingernails torn off the nail bed and ragged, jutting out of one of the grooves she had raked into the floor in her fight to get away. I collapsed on the floor and began crying. After a few minutes I pulled myself together, enough to look around the room for any other clues or some means of helping her. That's when I saw the blue envelope on my desk. You were right, she's a hot one, better than mine even. But I can tell she has the same slutty ways. It's in her eyes, but don't you worry, she'll find less tolerance for that over here. I'll be sure to keep her corrected. Don't bother on trying to come across either, bud. I figured out how to do it. But I'm gonna have to keep that close to my vest. I have to apologize for not being completely honest before. Things are worse here than I let on. Maybe Christine can keep me happy and satisfied with my life. But who's to say? Like I told you, some people are really losing it over here. I might have to come visit again sometime, more permanently. Till then, glory and peace, or as you would say, sincerely Scott. As I'm finishing writing this, I dread going back into the room. I know I have no way of getting her back now. I know I can't have her blood being found in my apartment. Even without hard evidence, there will be questions when she's reported missing. But all of that is in the background at the moment. I can't shake the feeling of being watched. I look around and see no one. But then I notice in the dingy brass door of the elevator across the hall where I'm sitting. The reflection is dark and distorted, but I can see myself in it, or at least a version of myself. It looks like me, but I can tell it isn't, because that version of me is laughing. I'll say it right now. I grew up in a broken home. Dad drank, Mom drank. That might be why I've never touched a drop, but I'm getting on a tangent here. Most of you already know where the story is going. Dad used to get drunk and blame Mom and I for all of his problems. Mom used to lock me in my room while well, you know what aggressive drunks do when they are upset. I'd say more often or not, my mom's screams and my own sobs were what rocked me to sleep. Then my mom started drinking and becoming numb to the whole thing. First, Dad kept hitting her and left me to cry in my room. I guess he got bored eventually. 3 days after my 5th birthday, Dad came in my room for the first time. He had never done that before. Mom had stopped him. He broke my nose that first night. We went to the hospital, and I told the doctor I fell down the stairs, and he seemed to believe me. It was like clockwork after that. Mondays, Dad would work late, and we rested. Tuesdays and Thursday nights, he was at the bar until well after my bedtime. Wednesdays were the worst. Fridays were normally insults and an occasional slap. Weekends, he drank himself to sleep around 4 in the afternoon. But Wednesdays, he'd come into my room and do his business. If I blocked the door, it would be a dozen rounds with a belt. If I cried, I'd get a slap for every tear. But if I was quiet and let his knuckles crack against my jaw and let him pull my short hair, I'd never have to make up stories at school. I was an adventurous boy, and no one looked twice when my hands were scraped or I had a bruise on my cheek. I lived for 2 years, feeling that one night my dad would hit me too hard and I would end up with the angels. Death scared me. One Wednesday, I was sitting in the corner when I saw him, a tall man in my corner. At first, I thought it was a woman. It looked like a black dress fell from the black face. I realized after a moment that it was a robe, a cloak, but I learned that word years later. I knew what I was looking at. I watched TV, I've read books, I knew what death was supposed to look like. But I wouldn't cry. Dad would come in, and I would get the belt, and death would take me away. But for all the pain in my life, I knew I wanted to live. That night I fell asleep on the floor, huddled in the corner of the room with a halo of moonlight coming from the window, resting around my feet. Death simply stood in the darkest corner of my room, behind the door leading to the hall. He was there every bad night after, always Wednesdays, some Fridays when my dad was in his worst mood. Every night he got closer. After 2 months, he would sit on the toy box at the end of my bed, sitting with his back against the wall, turned sideways, so I always caught a profile of his shadowy hood. "Why are you here?" I asked one night. He stared at me from the toy box, knees pressed to his chest and arms curled around his shins, almost in the fetal position, though there was no fear in the position, just boredom. "To watch," he told me. I swallowed at those first words. I had expected a quiet rasp, like on TV. Death's voice was something more. It was a burly man's confidence and strong. It was a caring mother's nurturing tone, a madman's laugh and a child's giggle. It disturbed and comforted me. "To watch what?" I asked. He simply looked at me. I saw his eyes for the first time that night. I had always expected soulless pits there. Instead, I found blue orbs in a bleached skull. Those orbs held the galaxies, eternal and non-existent. Everything and nothing lived in the shadows of his cloak. Those contradictions comforted me. "Over you, child," Death responded. I had thought he lied to me, and I grew upset. I asked him why he never stopped my father. "It's not my place to intervene," he told me. I asked him what he meant. He told me that he couldn't stop my father even if he tried. He was simply there to guide me if my worst nightmare ever came true. After that night, death was more of a father to me. In a way, my own never was. The next week, he brought a thick, leather-bound book. Within were fairy tales, dark and light themes, in countless languages. He told me the stories in the voice of my grandmother, who died when I was 4. When I got older, he stopped bringing the book. Instead, we stayed up till the crack of dawn talking. I asked him about the afterlife and why things are the way they were. He always answered vaguely, telling me that I'd understand one day. He stayed with me and comforted me until dawn peeked over my neighbor's roof. Then the sunlight would touch his black robe, turning it into a blind white. Then he was gone. He'd be back next week, and I'd get ready for school. I never tired when death spoke to me. Life went on. When I was 12, my doctor fixed my nose for the 3rd time and started asking questions. Within 3 weeks, I was taken from that home and put in an orphanage. In a Hollywood moment, my family doctor, who had heard about what had been happening from a friend at the hospital, adopted me. He and his wife had been trying for a child for years, but they never did. I lived a happy life after that. I never forgot what happened to me in my youth, though. I followed in my new father's footsteps and became a physician. Sadly, jobs were tight, and I took a role in the morgue. All those years around death helped me work with my new job, and I enjoyed it. My heart broke when my new mother was in an accident. I was the one that put the toe tag on her. I had to take the rest of the week off. But death was there that day. He stood in the corner of the storage room when I closed the drawer. Holding his skeleton hand was a little girl with green eyes and chocolate hair. I had seen my mother's family pictures and knew it was her, around 7 years old. It hurt me, but death nodded to me, and I knew that he would take care of her. In my lifetime, I've closed the drawer on 4 of my parents. Dad drove into a storefront when driving drunk. I had to leave the room when they wheeled him in. I would have spat on his cold husk of a body if I didn't. Mom drank herself into an early grave a year later. I pitied her when I closed the drawer. He had broken her soul, and she died in pain. Though my mother left the morgue the same way that my new mother did, I still remember the screams when death dragged my father through the floor, a red-hot chain and metal collar strapped around his neck. My father, the man that saved my life, died 4 years ago. He went quietly in his sleep. I volunteered to close the drawer on him. When I did, death arrived and took a little boy with dark hair and blue eyes. You may wonder why I'm writing this. In truth, I'm not quite sure myself. I guess I want to tell people not to fear death. He's a gentle being with a crappy job, and he saved my life. With the life he gave me, I've married. I've raised 3 children, 2 girls and a boy who look just like their mother. I have 9 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, and a 3rd on the way. I lost my wife last year to a heart attack. It still hurts me to think about, but I know that she didn't fear death. She knew my story, the one I'm telling to you now, and she went in her sleep, holding my hand. As I write these final thoughts, I look to my window. Out there I see a figure in the street, snow blowing white on black robes. A moment ago I opened the window to invite him in. When you live this long, you learn how to treat guests right. Now he's standing in the corner, patient as the day I met him. When I'm done with this post, I'll turn off my laptop, put the little girl he brought with him on my lap and close my eyes. My wife will close her brilliant blue eyes and rest her crimson locks on my chin. I'll take a breath and fall asleep. When I wake up, I'll be with my family. I'll see my mother and father again. I'll see my birth mom, happier than she was in life. I'll see my 4 dogs that I've had in my lifetime too, hopefully. Mortemor, death calls from the corner. I sigh and type faster. If I could say one last thing, I'd like to quote Blue Oyster Cult. Don't fear the Reaper, because after all, People are the real monsters. I started doing it on a whim. My brother had an unhealthy obsession with online vloggers. I can barely go a day without him linking me to a video of someone taking part in some sort of challenge or some sort of social experiment. So when this whole deep web mystery box trend started, I was one of the first to know. My brother must have sent me dozens of videos of annoying preteens opening boxes full of junk that they tried to pass off as creepy and sinister. When my brother asked me for my opinion, I told him that it combined all the boredom of unboxing videos with all the stupidity of the Tide Pod challenge. I added that most of them were probably making the boxes themselves. Even I could do it. And then the wheels started turning. A quick search confirmed that it was a growing trend, with hundreds of people claiming to have opened up boxes containing everything from drugs to murder weapons to mystery flash drives. Some vloggers even claimed that they had spent thousands of dollars on a single mystery box. Those were obviously fake, but what about the rest? Were there really people out there who would spend at least $100 for a chance to go viral? I bet that they would, and unfortunately, I was right. Putting the mystery box together was easier than I expected. I had some cardboard boxes stuffed in the back of my closet that turned out to be perfect size for the job. Some rusty screwdrivers provided as perfect murder weapons. My desk drawer offered a surprising number of old flash drives. I had made mystery box ready by filling them with as many creepy videos as I could download. Finally, some expired sinus tablets provided me with some mysterious deep web drugs once I peeled the labels off. Getting a website set up on the deep web was a little harder, but you can find an online tutorial for anything these days. By the time I was ready for bed, I was the proud owner of Emporium of Mysteries. For $50 of Bitcoin, anyone could be a proud owner of a mystery box. Sure, the site looked like it came straight out of the 90s, but it was good enough. I was in business. The next morning, I went looking for customers. Fortunately, my brother's messages had made me very familiar with the online vlogging community. I messaged a few of the smaller channels with some burner accounts that I had made and left a few comments on their latest videos. You should do a deep web unboxing video. You know what would be really cool? Unboxing something from the deep web. I bet you get millions of views. I heard about this new place on the deep web called Emporium of Mysteries. They sell mystery boxes there. You should check them out. Then all I had to do was sit back and wait. By the end of the day, I had 6 purchases. Not much all put together, but enough to put food on the table. By the end of the afternoon, I had the boxes ready to ship. I wasn't looking to scam these people after all. They still got to make their stupid videos, and I got to eat. Everyone was happy. I sold a few more over the next few weeks, but eventually, interest died down. Life went on. My brother sent me more stupid videos, and I gradually forgot about the time that I was a deep web merchant. Until last Friday, when I got home and there was a package waiting for me outside my apartment door. I picked it up and examined it. I realized that it was one of my mystery boxes. It looked like it had an unhappy customer, but it wasn't like they were getting their money back. I took it inside and opened it. It was empty, other than a flash drive that I did not recognize. I was curious to see what was on it, but I wasn't about to let some distinguished hacker infect my computer, so I got my old laptop that I hardly use anymore and plugged it in. It was full of pictures of my hometown, of my apartment, of me. Whoever sent this had been following me, had been inside my home. Staring at those pictures, I started to recognize just how out of my depth I was. You see, not everything you find on the deep web is fake. There are some people out there who do sell real mystery boxes, and they are tired of scammers like me taking away from their profits. Thankfully, they are very generous people and want to give me a second chance. So I am pleased to announce that the Emporium of Mysteries is under new management. Now, for the same low price, you can receive a genuine mystery box. It will include a special tool for my new partner's personal collection, along with a video instructing you how to use it and co-starring myself. The body part or organ extracted during the video will also be included as a special memento. Supplies are limited, so search us out in the deep web as soon as possible. We're looking forward to your business. One of the hottest trends on YouTube right now is ordering these random mystery boxes from complete strangers on the deep web and opening them on camera. I don't know why I didn't realize that a clear majority of these were fake and staged for the scare factor, but I didn't. I thought it was a great idea and hopped on the bandwagon to claim my YouTube stardom that I desperately longed for. For those who do not know a lot about the deep web, it's simply a part of the internet that isn't accessible from your basic Chrome, Firefox, or Explorer search engines. You must download the encryption program, Tor, and the Tor browser, for starters. It's not illegal to access this part of the internet, but since it's anonymous, a great deal of illegal actions happen there. The possibilities are endless. I grabbed my laptop I've had since I graduated in 2011 and download the required programs. I prefer to use my laptop over my desktop in case of viruses and such. My 7-year-old laptop is a little bit more disposable. I had a little Bitcoin phase a few years ago when it was blowing up, so I saved a little bit already. It wasn't much, only 0.1 Bitcoin, which translates to roughly $632, but it was enough to get what I was looking for. After all the downloads were finished, I opened the browser and started my journey at the Hidden Wiki website. They provide a lot of useful links to get started on the deep web. I scrolled through the warnings and gists of what it was and found the links I was looking for. Almost forgot, I muttered to myself as I grabbed the duct tape from my desk drawer. I cut a teeny square piece off and placed it over my webcam. Call me paranoid, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I clicked the first link and waited what seemed like forever for the page to load. It was a very plain page with a list of popular websites that you can scroll through on the side. I continued my search through the web links until I found a page dedicated to mystery boxes. I wanted to find one around $500 so people knew I meant business on my channel. These were relatively small, staying around 0.0125 to 0.05 Bitcoin range. I wasn't worried about being scammed. I decided to continue my search after a quick bathroom break. When I came back, I noticed that the cursor was off to the side and was able to click on a link that must have matched the background color of the website because I couldn't see it. I indulged in my curiosity and clicked the link. I was taken to a pitch black page with small white text near the top. I'm selling one random package to any brave enough to receive it for only 0.12 Bitcoin. Only one, huh? I thought to myself. I'll shoot my shot. I hit the small payment button and was asked how much I would like to spend. I entered 0.1 Bitcoin. With my fingers crossed, the payment went through without any hesitation, and I instantly was met with a chat box asking me where I would want the package sent. I know it wasn't a good idea, and I regret it to this day, but the other YouTube channels used their own address often, so I thought nothing of it. I gave them my home address. I waited over a month for the box to come in, 36 days to be exact. It arrived directly on my front porch and was wrapped numerous times in red tape. I set my camera on the tripod and adjusted it to show me and the box on the small wooden table. I draped a sheet in the background so it would look more professional. I collected some gloves and scissors so I could bang out this video in one go. Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's vlog. Boy, I got a surprise for you. I continued my monologue, mentioning how I got this box and how much I paid. Without wasting further time, let's open this deep web mystery box. I grabbed the scissors and cut along the red tape. I made sure my gloves were on tight, and I ripped open the box. My brow furrows as I see just one book. Without saying a word, I take the book out of the box. I was pretty pissed. Spent over $600 on a book. Well folks, looks like we have ourselves a dud. These pages better be made of gold. The outside of the book was old and tattered. It smelled like mildew and mold. I cracked the book open to the first page and glanced over the contents. It's an old photo album. Smells like old rot. Look at these pictures. I show the camera a view of the page contents. It has 4 pictures on the first page, all labeled by days. The first picture said day 1, the second said day 2, and so on. The pictures were just taken from an old Polaroid camera. The pictures were of airplanes, random suitcases, couple of taxis, and some pretty shady motels. Looks like someone's old travel photos. I continue flipping through the pages. Every day was a different photo of a nature of cars or trains. Day 18 held the oddest photo yet. It was just a mask, handcuffs, a gag, and a bottle of some sort of drug it looked like. These people had one hell of a fetish. I tried to keep the video interesting. I zoomed into the pictures with the camera so everyone could see it. Around day 32, things started getting weird. There was a picture of a house, but not just any house. It was a house I grew up in. My parents' house. My hands covered my mouth as I gasped for air. How was this? I was unable to form a sentence. I'm at a loss for words. Day 33. I turn the page and see a man and a woman handcuffed and gagged. I immediately expel the contents of my stomach as I see my own mom's scared and crying face and my dad, face first, in a pile of what looked like black tar. Day 34. This photo is taken inside of what looks like a vehicle. I focus my gaze on the dashboard, where there's a small photo barely visible. It's an old school photo of me. There in my dad's truck. Day 35. Another house, but this one is much smaller. The photo is too blurry to make out any details. My hands are trembling, and all I can hear is my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I flip to the last page. I immediately throw the book down on the ground and run to the window. I jiggle the hatch frantically and throw it open. Without hesitation, I jump out and run to my neighbors. As I'm running, I turn around for a brief second. What I saw still haunts me to this day. A tall hooded figure stood in my room, looking at me through the window. He stood motionless before lifting his hand and waving. I screamed for my neighbors, who hurried me inside and called the cops. I sat there and just cried. I cried out of fear for my life. I cried for my parents. I cried because it was all my fault. My lack of common sense got my parents killed, and I will have to live with that forever. If you access the deep web, do not release your personal information, even if the people on YouTube do. Most of it's not real. And always check your boxes. It would have saved me a lot of trouble if I would have noticed that the box I received had no tracking sticker on it. It was hand delivered. As you may have expected, the siege of Area 51 ended disastrously for everyone involved. How do I know? I was of the deluded, though determined congregation that stormed the base. Our numbers were minuscule in comparison to those who had pledged their participation online, but still we rated as a formidable army. Hundreds sprinted collectively in kind of a mutually shared mania. Our speeds, though impressive, did not surpass those of bullets. The guards were posted on the perimeter around the base, befitting any other military establishment. They hadn't expected a serious effort, at least not one of our size. And when we approached en masse, bored, inexperienced, and sun-fatigued soldiers snapped to delayed action as we beleaguered the compound. Some of us were immediately dispatched by on-site deterrents. Buried proximity sensors activated, anti-personnel turrets loaded with non-lethal rounds. Bodies fell in clusters, with a sizable portion of our admittedly pitiful army immediately turned back towards their vehicles. Those of us who persisted, determined to uncover the secrets of the legendary base, continued the onslaught. Armed with nothing but our cameras, makeshift gadgets, and curiosity, I remember leaping over a fallen comrade, his eyes pouring with tears, as he dabbed delicately with a napkin a large red mark on his forehead, where he had been struck with one of the automatic defense system's pellets. The group-borne energy was quickly depleted in the face of the base's efficient weaponry. By the time myself and others reached the actual fence that enclosed the base, the guards had already taken up the position of suppression, which would have easily been our doom if some of us hadn't anticipated such quick failure before we had even set foot on the actual grounds. No one had brought weapons, so as to avoid being charged with any major felonies, though we had equipped ourselves with various devices which we believed inimical to the human psyche. Every manner of hypnotic or hallucinogenic construction was employed, devices meant to stun, disorientate, confuse and baffle, hastily prepared, and not so expertly used. Most of the guards we targeted merely laughed, with others who seemed to succumb, albeit minimally, to the desert effects. However, the momentary lapse in concentration and formation was all we needed. Our sheer numbers collided with theirs, to our favor. Upon breaching the perimeter fences, a great, exultant roar could be heard, as our forces tasted a small yet totally unforeseen victory. And the guards, who had been gatekeepers, merely stood in disbelief. Though our numbers had been reduced to only a few dozen, we searched through the massive plot of land with as much fervor as before, and dispensed into smaller groups to cover more ground. My group, comprised of those who sought the answers to the Roswellian mystery and hoped to capture images of the extra-mundane nature, entered a long and seamlessly spacious building to the east of the compound. The building's construction suggested that it used to be a hangar for aircraft, and I'm sure you can guess what sort of aircraft we expected to find. Most guards were present there, though we dispatched them without issue using our hypnotic gadgets. Inside, though indeed a hangar, we found only a regular, mundane aerial vehicle of earthling design. We maintained radio contact with other groups, and to our great disappointment, they reported similar failures in uncovering any extraterrestrial artifacts. Strangely, the group that believed the base housed non-alien, yet equally preternatural objects or presence hadn't reported their findings. My group unanimously agreed that this was troubling. Due to the group containing the hardest and most devoted of our congregation, we set out to find the silent detachment. A flame of interest reignited within us. By then, our numbers had dwindled to a fraction of what we first entered, most of them having been detained or slain by the armed personnel who saw us ransacking and looting as troublesome enough to warrant serious retaliation. Gunfire was heard, blood was smelled, and the screams were unnervingly cut short all around us. My group came across a duo of rather trigger-happy guards who had just neutralized an entire gang of truth seekers, and if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of those brave, we would have all fallen. He charged the guards, tackling them to the ground, allowing for us to escape into the unmarked building, whose stairs led into the earth. Behind us, the guards were struggling, and then the sound of a rifle. The building stairs led down for a great distance, and though I was never particularly good with determining geographical scale, I am at least certain that our descent measured a mile, perhaps more. Concrete walls with stairs descended interminably. The passageways illuminated, at intervals, by simple bulbs that dangled from chains affixed to the ceiling. We grew weary despite the downward trek, and 2 members fell from exhaustion. When we turned to help them, they demanded we continue on. Eventually we arrived at a large metal door, with a simple crank serving as a knob. I turned the crank, and after a strenuous effort, managed to open the door, which revealed a massive, dimly lit room, whose walls were lined with humming machinery. I recognized none of the devices and terminals that littered the room, nor did my companions, and most of what we saw seemed to be several years beyond anything of our time. The room, a gallery of super scientific design. In the center of the room was a raised, square black pad, about 12 by 12 feet, slightly bigger than a bedroom, with a metal podium linked to the machinery nearby. A sort of lamp hung over the platform, and a network of thick wiring and tubing led from the space into the unlit recesses of the room. Despite the ostensibly inert state of the machinery, we heard and felt a constant vibration emanate from the construction, a power of some kind that flowed to or from the weird platform. As we circled the thing, examining the very aspects of which I've related here, we at one point heard gunfire from the stairwell we had left, and the agonized cries of the exhausted couple. Our awestruck emotions turned to panic, frantic searching as we looked for some manner of defense from the attackers, or an escape from the room. No doors could be found. The only items capable of being weaponized were several steel chairs placed before the bizarre machinery. Doubting our success against the military combatants, I decided to make use of the focal pad. I've seen enough science fiction media to speculate that it was used for a transport of nature. Intuition and common sense allowed me to activate the machine to some degree, and the pad's overhanging lamp glowed hotly above us. Still determined to fight off the guards with the chairs, my companions gathered at the door and attempted to bar it with the chair leg, leaving me to operate the machine. After a series of button presses of no particular order, the pad began emitting a low yet powerful hum, and the digital display of the podium began counting down from 30. A small screen to the left of this displayed a series of numbers which obviously pertained to a date. And without needing a second of self-reassurance, I plotted a temporal location considerably before the current date. I practically leaped onto the pad, and just as I felt the vibrations and strange, inexpressible pulsations overcome my body, I saw the door defending group get blown back by some explosive device. What happened next, I cannot accurately describe. There was a sensation of dematerialization and atomic destruction, and subsequent reformation, and then a transference of form, not across the physical distance, but through some more abstract, illimitable expanse, as if I was blasted into existence. I don't know if it was through time or reality I traveled, and my instantaneous voyage was one of chronological reversal, or if I had been admitted to a reality where the entity resembling myself had not yet embarked into the ill-fated assault. If this was truly my original world, and I've defied the once irreversible current of time, then I can only warn you all of what happened if you attend that stupid, perilous storm. If the machine's purpose is of an arguably grander nature, and I've been cast into a mirrored realm of my own, then my astonishment still stands. I'm not sure what to make of things. I feel as if I've merely been given a second chance in my own timeline. However, there are certain things which puzzle me about this place, namely, how no one in this realm seems to have heard of the recent declassified lunar compound that our group planned to siege after Area 51, where the secrets of the extinct anti-human lizard men are rumored to be kept. When I was younger, I liked to window shop at the deep web. It wasn't anything serious. I would just look at the prices of various substances and how to get them delivered. That was my first exposure to cryptocurrency, and I wish I had never bought my first Bitcoin. There's a forum out there. I wish I could tell you that it was dead and buried by now, but I know it isn't. I know because they're still tracking me. The first thread I read, there seemed like some kind of gambling action. Admins would take bets and the users would place them. But the bets weren't on sports or horse racing, not even on cockfights. They were on suicides. Who would do it when and why? Who would push them over the edge and be the straw to break the camel's back? In order to place any bets, I would have to exchange Bitcoin for Deathcoin. The process was difficult, very difficult for a kid in high school. But when I finally did, it was exhilarating. The person I chose was, at the time, another high schooler. Her name was Karen, and she was in the same town that I am, but went to a different school. Once the bet was placed, I was delivered via PDF a dossier on her life. I knew her habits and routines. I knew how long it took her to wake up in the morning and how long it took her to go to sleep. I even knew her favorite color, which was blue. I bet that after a year of harassment, she would be in a wooden box 6 feet under. The admins would dedicate a thread to each victim for updates on their progress, and each victim had several field workers dedicated to them. They received the same dossier I did. The difference is that they went outside and put it to use. Field agents would covertly harass her in all ways, graffiti directed at her, speaking about her all day within earshot, and the most daring agents broke into her house regularly. They didn't steal anything though. What they did was move her furniture ever so slightly in the same direction for months. Needless to say, this brought her past her brink. Karen began hearing voices in her head, and she couldn't distinguish them from the ones outside. They would all tell her the same thing: kill yourself. And so on the first Friday of October, she exited her parents' house and made it into the garage with her mother's keys. The engine sparked and the exhaust filtered from the muffler into the car. She passed out an hour later. The field agents had won like they always do. Congratulations, Karen Walters was found dead this morning in her mother's car. The lucky winner is user number 228305504. Attached to the thread was the article about the suicide. My number was just a few days before the winners, so I lost hundreds of bucks, but I did get to watch someone spiral down for a year. Like I said before, it was exhilarating and well worth it. Who wouldn't pay $100 for front row seats of someone ending it? We all would. Humanity is a dark thing, and I'm no exception. But the loss left a bad taste in my mouth, so I never placed another bet. I didn't even return to the forum for years, until I noticed my couch was slightly out of place. Cold sweat beaded down my neck, and I turned my computer on and fired up Tor for the first time since high school. It took some digging, but I finally found the site, and there I was, a whole thread dedicated to me. I was chosen, but I have something that the others don't. I know what you're doing, and I'll be coming for you. The story that I'm about to tell you took place when I was a teenager. I was living with my family. It was me, my parents, my older brother and sister, and my grandmother. I had a younger sister too, but she and my grandfather both died in a car accident several years earlier. We moved houses not long after. Our new house was much bigger. I think having a smaller, cozier house would have let us feel the absence too easily. In a larger home, we could just dismiss their absence as them being in another room, even though we knew they weren't. Anyway, one Halloween, our whole family minus Grandma were gathered in the living room. We had lit a fire and put a movie on for the evening. It was late and the trick-or-treaters were starting to thin out. The movie was in a bit of a lull when we heard a shriek come from upstairs. Instantly we knew it was Grandma who had screamed, so we all ran up in a panic. As we climbed up the stairs, we could hear her sobbing and saying, "It's you, it's really, really you." She kept repeating that in kind of a hoarse cry as we made our way up to her room. When we got there, she had fallen down onto the floor with her back against the wall. She looked paler than any of us had ever seen her before. Tears streaked her face and her breath was ragged, but her expression was a mixture of bliss and excitement. Standing across the room, dressed in an old-fashioned suit with a hat in his hands, stood my grandfather. I'm sure I don't have to tell you how stunned we all were. None of us are particularly superstitious, and even if we were, that's just not the sort of thing you would ever expect to come across. Had I known what I know now, I would have ordered him out of our house that very minute, but I didn't. My mom was the first one to break down. Seeing her father again brought tears to her eyes immediately, but my grandfather simply smiled and reassured her. We all spoke for what felt like hours, hearing the story of how my grandmother was in her room, getting ready for bed, when she heard a tapping on the window. When she turned, she saw his face there, just peeking in at her. She explained that this wasn't the first time something like this happened. When you lose someone you love, you see them everywhere. But when he didn't leave, and motioned her to open the window, and then climbed in once she had, Grandma knew it wasn't the same. That's when she screamed and we came in. After that, Grandpa regaled us with tales of the other side. How beautiful it is. How all your wildest dreams can't compare to the reality of it. I'd like to tell you that I was skeptical, but I was just happy to see my grandpa again. He explained how, when the time is right, spirits can come back to the land of the living, and there's so much superstition and rituals going on during Halloween that the barrier between the worlds grew thin. He apologized for not visiting sooner, claiming he had tried many times, but simply hadn't had enough experience until this year. And we all believed him. Once all of that was finished, it was best if we left my grandparents alone to catch up. Grandpa stood up and turned to my grandmother and reached out his hand. "I got a lot to tell you. Come with me," he smiled as he said this, a warm, friendly smile. She took his hand, and together they walked down the hall and out of sight. The rest of us went back downstairs, still shaken by what had just occurred. We spent a long time in silence there, by the fire. Trick-or-treaters would still stop by, but even more infrequently than before. Eventually, we got back to talking and joking, almost as if there wasn't a ghost upstairs. It was the best night we had spent together in years. Mother was just telling us a story about Grandpa when he was her age, when the doorbell rang again. It was going on 11 o'clock, so we weren't expecting any more children. A cry of, "Trick or treat," came from outside our door. So my mom stopped her story and went to the door. My mom loved children. She peeked out the front door window and caught a glimpse of the young girl standing there in her pink princess outfit. She swung the door open, not waiting to get a full view of the girl before complimenting her costume. "Well, don't you look, adore." Then there was a sound of the bowl hitting the floor. My mother froze mid-sentence. "What's wrong, Mommy?" The voice didn't come from any of us. It came from outside. My father, older siblings, and I looked at each other before racing to the front door. When I got there, my heart leaped into my throat and tears filled my eyes. Standing in the doorway was my younger sister, Sarah. Sarah, the one who had been killed in the car crash years earlier. Those of you who have shared a house with a young child can imagine how deeply their absences felt. There is no aspect of life that they don't affect in one way or another. And when she died, nothing was the same. And there she stood, not a day older, and not a mark on her body. I broke down crying. When I looked around, I saw that my whole family was crying, and Sarah looked deeply troubled by it. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" The voice snapped us all back into the moment. "Of course you didn't, sweetie," my mother replied hurriedly, adding, "We just missed you. Can I come in now?" We let her in, of course. The family then talked like we hadn't talked in years. Sarah was just the same as she had ever been. Back then I would have called her annoying. But that night, there's nothing that she could have done to annoy me, even if she tried. Once we had been back together for about an hour or so, Sarah looked towards my parents. "Mom, Dad, can I show you something?" "Of course you can, honey," my mother said. She still had a tear in her eye. Sarah leapt off the couch. "Great, come with me," holding out both of her hands for my mother and father to take. Suddenly I realized that Grandma was still upstairs and had no idea that Sarah had come back, so I went upstairs to get her. When I got upstairs, I saw my grandfather coming out of the room quietly and shutting the door behind him. When I asked him where Grandma was, he told me that she's resting. I asked him if she could come downstairs, and he simply said that wouldn't be possible, before adding that she would have plenty of time to spend with Sarah. I was excited. "Did this mean that you're staying with us?" I asked my grandfather, and he just smiled and went downstairs with me. My older siblings were chatting in the living room when Sarah came skipping in from around the corner. "Where's Mom and Dad?" I asked. But when we went to the basement, they started kissing and hugging, and told me to go back upstairs, so I did. That didn't sound right. I couldn't imagine my mother leaving Sarah's side for a moment tonight. Nobody else seemed to find it strange though. Grandpa just laughed and said adults were weird, and I would understand someday. Then he turned to my brother and said he brought him a gift, something to make up for the lost birthdays and Christmases. He held out his hand for my brother to take. "Come with me." It was only at this point I grew suspicious. I asked Grandpa where the gift was, to which he said, "Oh, don't you worry. You'll get yours soon enough." I urged my brother not to go with him, but he didn't listen, taking my grandfather's hand, and the two of them went down the hall together. Sarah turned to us and said, "Mommy and Daddy have been down there for a while. Let's go check on them." She reached out for us. "Come with me." My older sister reached for Sarah, but I slapped her hand away. "Billy, what the? Don't go with her," I begged. "Come on, Meg." Sarah said. Billy just doesn't want to see Mom and Dad kissing. Before I could stop her, Meg took Sarah's hand and the two of them went downstairs to the basement. Grandpa started coming back down the hall, alone, and his eyes met mine. I've got your gift ready now, Billy. Come with me. I ran past him into the room and shut the door behind me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a cell phone yet, and there are no home phones in my room. They hadn't been openly violent yet, but how long was that going to last? All I could do was sit in there and wait for them to either break in or leave. Heavy footsteps come down the hall and stopped outside my door. My grandfather began calling me, begging me to come out so he could give me my present. A few minutes later, his voice was joined with Sarah's, asking me why I didn't want to come play with her. Why don't you love me anymore, Billy? What did I do wrong? She sounded like she was on the verge of tears. I can't possibly tell you how hard it was to stay in there, listening to my little sister beg me to play with her one last time. But the survival instinct is a strong one, and I kept the door shut. The clock chimed 12, and all fell silent. I looked under the door, and my grandfather's figure was no longer casting a shadow underneath. I placed my ear to the door, listened carefully. I heard nothing. My family was out there, possibly hurt. I had to go check, or call for help. Do something at least. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Across the hall, through an open door, I could see my brother laying on the ground, motionless. He was pale, and didn't look like he was breathing. I was only in high school, but I ran over to him. I checked his wrist and neck for a pulse, but I found nothing. All I saw was one of his hands was tinged black. I ran upstairs. I should have called the police or an ambulance or somebody, but my mind wasn't working. I found Grandma in the same state, pale, not breathing, her hands slightly blackened. My heart started racing. I had to go into the basement. But I couldn't go in the basement because I knew what I would find. The rest of my family just lying there, pale and motionless, dead. I sat there for a long time, paralyzed, before I decided I had to know. The descent to the basement felt longer than it ever had before. I felt cold and numb. Each step felt like an eternity. But when I got to the bottom, I saw exactly what I knew I would find. My parents and older sister laying on the floor. I began to cry like I hadn't done in years, like I hadn't done since my little sister died. You stupid boy. The voice was sinister and evil, sounded like every demon in every horror movie you've ever seen, and worse. I spun around, and Sarah was there. But she was different. Her eyes were empty sockets, and her mouth was a black, lipless hole, ringed with fangs. You have no more family, no more loved ones. They all came with me. They are mine now. And you? You will live the rest of your life alone. You will die somewhere, forgotten, alone, and afraid. You will never see your family again. Ever. Then the thing paused, and let out its hand. Unless, of course, you come with me. You can be with us all again, forever. I'd like to tell you now that I kept my distance, that I told her to get out of my house, or at least that I sat frozen. But what she said was true. I felt it deep in my bones. I would never see my family again if I didn't go with her. I was just a kid, a scared, stupid kid who wanted his mom. I stood there shaking, and I reached out my hand slowly. Sarah's mouth formed a sick smile as I approached. Then there was a noise upstairs. The clock chimed 1 o'clock, and I looked up just for a heartbeat. There was a distant scream, and when I looked forward again, Sarah was gone. I called 911, and it was eventually deemed that my family died from carbon monoxide poisoning, and that the leak had spontaneously resolved itself and disappeared through my grandma's open window. My experiences were brought on by hysteria and oxygen deprivation. It could have been worse. They could have blamed me. I was legally an adult at this point, so the estate fell to me. I sold the house and everything in it and moved to a small apartment, using the proceeds to put myself through school after I graduated from high school. If you see a loved one who has passed away this Halloween, please don't let them in. Don't take their hand, and never, ever go with them. You might be asking why I'm sharing this now. It's a fair question. For many years I've been terrified of the things that came to my house that night. For decades, I thought that the scariest thing in the world was the idea of whatever came to visit, whatever we let into our home, that they weren't my family. This year though, I had a thought that was even more disturbing still. What if they were?